All right, good evening, ladies and gents. We are here for the Town Council 2013 Town Manager Budget Presentation. This is kind of our first hearing of the Budget Committee, and open to the public for questions, and we're kind of going to start off the process tonight. So we are going to rise for the allegiance to the flag. Joe? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you'd all stay standing for a brief moment of silence. Thank you. Please be seated. All right. So to start us off tonight, I believe Chief Hart is going to come up and speak a few things about a employee who just retired.
Actually, we have,
Please.
actually, first, thanks very much for letting us come by. I know it's a bit out of schedule, that tonight was reserved for the budget, but I appreciate the council taking this time to recognize not just a retirement, but two promotions. It is with a sense of both happiness for Cindy and her family that she will be retiring and being able to spend more time with her family, but also a sense of personal sadness that I want to present Cindy McCann, who is retiring from the town of Londonderry after 28 years, 24, I believe, or 25 of which she has served as the telecommunications supervisor. Watching that unit grow from a fairly small, basic operation of phone call and radio to a comprehensive communications center, one that is respected throughout the state. Indeed, one of the letters that was sent to us when she retired was from the Department of Safety, Colonel Quinn, who extolled her virtues. So, Cindy, why don't you come on up and take this moment to say goodbye to the council. Thank you very much for the time. Let me introduce you to each, just so nobody gets to forget you.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Congrats, Cindy.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service. Service to the Budget Committee, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Cindy, for your I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce to you the new telecommunications supervisor, Bobby Jones. Bobby Jones is also a 20-plus year employee of the town of Londonderry. Bobby's here with his family. And Barbara and Bobby, why don't you both come up together?
After you, dear.
Trained well.
And I'd like to introduce you, Bobby Jones and his wife, Barbara. Barbara is the longest-serving dispatcher in the state, by the way, right now, and she also works for us. So, Bobby Jones, please meet the council.
Oh, we know Bobby.
Congratulations, sir.
And he's here with his family. I think Sam and Jeff right here. And lastly, but certainly not least, Sergeant Glenn April is here with his family. Glenn has been with the department also more than 20 years and was recently promoted to sergeant. Glenn, come on up, and with your lovely wife, Helene. Glenn has been a friend and someone who served in the acting capacity as sergeant for on many occasions, always with distinction, and recently was promoted through the process that occurred in this past July. So we're really proud to have Glenn in the ranks of supervisor. Thank you very much, Glenn, and I'd like to introduce you to the council. And Helene, go right ahead.
Come on up, Glenn.
Now, one of the things you'll note is all three of the folks tonight that you've met, those who have been promoted as well as those who are leaving us, spent more than 20 years in the employ of the town of Londonderry. And what this means, what this sort of boiled down, and since we just passed the Thanksgiving holiday, and since we're in that time of eating well, the roux, R-O-U-X, that French sauce that's boiled down, the roux of 20 years' work is this. It is commitment. It is commitment to the people who work here every day, people who need the services, who sometimes demand the services. These folks showed their commitment by being professional, personable, competent every single day. And for that, I think they're to be commended. And it's a joy for me as the chief of police to both promote and a sadness to say goodbye to Cindy as a coworker, never as a friend. Thanks for the time today. I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Dave, do you want to start us off tonight?
Sure. At our last meeting, which was on November 21st, there were a number of items which either the council or the budget committee requested that we respond to. And we did send out an email to both bodies on Wednesday to give you an idea of the implications by looking at FY13 default budget. We've done a little bit more in-depth analysis today, on which I passed out that spreadsheet again to the town council and the budget committee. And what we did is we first looked at returning everything to the actual default numbers, and then we reallocated some dollars. For example, the finance department default budget was higher than their FY13 recommended budget. For example, they've had two positions which have been transitioned from full-time to part-time, so there are some savings there. And so you'll notice when you go through that list that we've essentially worked a vast majority of the budgets on a one-to-one basis back to what the FY12 operating budget is. And then we reallocated the savings to two areas. One is that we fully funded gasoline expenses at $72,000 for an increase of $72,400, and then we also put the balance into police department overtime. As you know, the issue of providing a level of public safety to which our citizens have become accustomed has been an issue and discussion with the council for a number of years now, and we're seeking to address the issue in a policy matter with the fire department in a separate warrant article. So we took the savings, which I believe were about $25,000, we're able to reallocate between departments back in the police department budget for additional overtime. Essentially, by subscribing to a FY13 default budget, we expect that the budget would be reduced from my recommended amount by about $600,000, $592,865. In my memo, I gave you a sense of those items which have been included in my recommended budget based upon the council's directive to present a budget to continue the same level of services. And I've gone through each of those departments to give you a sense of those types of expenses which would have to be removed from the budgets if a default budget was adopted. The second part of that direction from the council was to look at incorporating some road reconstruction funds into the operating budget as part of a transition from bonding road reconstruction activities to placing them in the operating budget. And I've used a benchmark of about $200,000. Originally, the request was $250,000, and to use $48,000 of undesignated fund balance. Under the new town budget process with our revised charter is that the budget looks at the bottom line expense and not actually at the tax impacts. Even though you want to spend $250,000, if you have $48,000 or $50,000 on the revenue side, for a net tax impact of $200,000, the default budget doesn't recognize the $250,000. It's going to recognize that as a total expense, which you have to work within the budget. So for purpose of this exercise, I've used $200,000 as a figure to raise within the default budget. which obviously will require us to reduce spending in a number of different areas. And at this point in time, we suspect that there'll be a number of line items impacted. Predominantly, we anticipate that if the council follows through with that policy statement, that we'll be looking to reduce our personnel costs by about $158,000, which will require the reduction or elimination of 2 to 3 staff positions throughout the town. So that'll give you an idea of the magnitude of what we're looking at with respect to that exercise. On page 3 of your memo, there was also a request about what is being funded under the various management services line items found throughout the budget. And just so we're all aware is that the town's operating budget does not maintain a contingency account. It hasn't, as far as I know, at least since I've been here for 10 years, or any kind of management reserve. So the memo sets forth, and I won't read the entire list, but there's at least 50 different examples of the type of activities and responsibilities which are funded through various management services line items, including outside appraisals for abatement court cases, the ambulance billing service, alarm monitoring fees, our lawn care contracts, stormwater Phase 2 EPA permits, sign inventories, right-of-way and easement research, help wanted ads, printing tax bills, bank deposit bags. So there's a whole list of expenses which department managers use that line to fund various responsibilities. The third major segment of that memo dealt with looking at the transition from road reconstruction funding from bonds to operating budget. And you can slice that pie 1,000 different ways. So we've only given you a couple of examples. On the next to last page, the example which we've provided to the Council and Budget Committee presumes that we're going to stop funding road reconstruction activities with this budget on consideration, FY13, and maintain a $1 million goal of spending $1 million a year on roads. And the next example is $800,000. Again, those numbers were just picked to give the boards a sense of the magnitude. And the goal, obviously, is to maintain a level tax rate impact dedicated towards that source. So as you can see, when you have declining balances with respect to your bonds allocated to roads, then your corresponding allotment of tax dollars raised off the tax rate to reconstruct roads increases, whereby currently, if the town ceased to approve any further bonds, the latest bond, which we bonded this year, would be paid off in 2022, and then in 2023, we carry forward with an appropriation. The bottom line with these two examples are if the town decided to transition this year and pick the $1 million level, you'd be looking at about a 9-cent increase in the tax rate this year, and then it'd be level going forward. If you're looking at a $800,000 level, then the tax rate would increase about 6 cents. This is 18 to 23, but it's rounding, obviously, so it'd be 5 cents and some change. It would level off at that point and continue on until town voters decided otherwise. So again, the $1 million and $800,000, you can substitute those for any numbers which the council or budget committee felt comfortable with, and we can run those numbers for you. On the last page is another example which presumes that the town will continue to issue bonds for a period of 10 years, not 10 additional years. I believe it's up to 4 or 5 additional years now. And so the funds available for roads would be in the form of a bond until 2017. And then you'd fund roads at the then highest debt impact, which would be 37 cents in 2018, which you can see in 2019, you would have an additional $157,900 available for roads, and then it progresses up in 2027 to about almost $1.2 million. Those are simply 3 examples I think what's consistent among all the examples is that you're going to have a valley in the available funds between when you stop bonding and you start picking up on the tax rate. Just naturally, it's going to happen no matter where you do it in the schedule. I mean, that, if the council is considering that, then we really ought to make sure that everybody recognizes that, so Janos can plan accordingly, and obviously, you don't want to go from $1 million a year to $158,000 a year, so he's obviously got a plan to keep some of that money aside to provide road reconstruction during that period which we're ramping up for the discontinuance of bond proceeds and towards a full reliance upon the property tax base for road reconstruction activities.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Sure. We also, I'm sorry, I was also asked on the last page to list, according to the department head request, the percentage increase from the FY12 budget, and that is on the last page. It's probably the middle column says percent change, and that ranks them according to the percent requested. Again, this is based upon the council's directive to present an idea of what staff feels would be an appropriate appropriations to continue services at their current level. So you can see how they range from a high of 27.55% to a low of 61.68. If you look at the bottom one, billing department, it's down 22%, which, just want to clarify that. If you recall, during the budget process, we had discussed the possibility of merging inspection services with fire and building, and as we worked through this year, it was more efficient to transfer some inspection responsibilities from fire to building, but maintain a fire marshal in the fire department, but that was budgeted in the billing department. That's why it looks like the billing department is down 22%. And consequently, that's one of the reasons why the fire department seems to be up 18%. I mean, the fire department request was up, but it wasn't up to that magnitude, so.
Okay. Thanks, Dave. All right, so there you have it. Dave pretty much has given us a baseline to work with, and I guess at this point, we should bring it up to the council and find out what everybody's thinking. So I guess we can start on the left and work our way this way. So, John, you want to take a first shot at it?
I'm good for now. I'll wait to hear what people have to say.
Okay. Tom?
Dave, could you explain one more time for us and for the public the implications of the default?
If the voters reject the budget that we submit when they vote for the default, is an implication to the expense side differently than the implication to the revenue side?
Well, there's a different implication either whether they adopt the recommended budget or the default budget. Well, most of the default budget, in that in prior years, the council goal was always to look at the tax rate impact. So therefore, if you had a higher budget but you had offsetting revenues, that would soften the tax rate impact. With the default budget process, we don't have that flexibility because the way the law is written, it's simply your FY12 operating budget, increase or decrease by contractual obligations and/or one-time expenses. So, you know, in the most extreme example, you know, if we had a rich uncle pass away in Londonderry and left you $5 million towards the operating budget, that obviously may entice voters to approve an operating budget other than default. However, it can't be credited against the default budget because the bottom line is X, as opposed to being offset by revenues. So we're looking at a different system, we're looking at the bottom line expenses and sort of setting aside, from a legal perspective, the impact on the tax rate.
In this new form of government we have, I know that in the prior form of government, we could have explained that in a narrative at town meeting. In this new form of government, is there any way to explain that to people with supplemental documentation or some notation on the ballot, or is there any way to explain that to people in this new form of government?
Well, pending approval of the moderator, I think you can hand out information at the polls. I'm not sure we'd be allowed under state law to have an explanatory message on the ballot, except for the projected tax rate. If they look at the tax rate, tax impact as opposed to the numbers, then that would give the voters an indication of the impact of the revenues, but I don't think we'd be allowed to put an explanatory note on the, we could do it at deliberative session,
I was just gonna
obviously.
say, I think the deliberative session comes first, so I
Yeah,
don't see any
yeah.
reason why we can't explain it,
You
just
can
like we're
do it
doing
at
now.
deliberative session, but when people come to vote, I don't think we'd be able to put that information on the actual ballot.
But the deliberative session, we might reach 200 people versus the 2,000 or 3,000 that may be at the ballot.
That's correct.
Well, we could also rely on the media and to get our message out that way, because in all honesty, it would be pretty difficult to communicate that to everybody coming in to vote. They just want to do their thing and get out, so I would say that that would probably be we'd have to work it that way, use the internet and the papers.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Frida?
So Dave, if I understand it, for example, if the voters changed the allocation of where the LUCT tax went, put it all in the general fund, that wouldn't have any effect on the two choices, because that's a revenue item.
Exactly.
Okay.
It would impact the tax rate, but it would impact the expense side. That's correct.
And with your reallocation, the reallocation at 26,398,867, that includes the 250,000 or 200,000 in money going to Llanos?
That does not.
That does not.
That does not. The impact of that can be found on page 2 of the memo I sent out, which, you know, I've identified a couple of different departments which we'd have to reduce the operating expenses below what we're looking at for FY '12, what we currently are approved for. The largest impact, what I anticipate to be, will be staff position reductions.
Okay.
Page 2 of the memo? Various departments, is that?
Yeah, page 2 of the memo,
Yeah.
towards the middle bottom.
So in order to put the 250,000 in, you're saying there would have to be 2 to 3 staff positions reduced?
That's our estimate at this point, that's correct.
Okay, and some other smaller amounts?
That's correct.
Or alternative, that's your suggestion, but if we came up with cuts somewhere else,
That's the council's prerogative, absolutely. Yep.
Good for now? You still, that's fine. Keep going.
no, but just the bottom line is, if we did everything in this memo here, there would be little or no difference between default and the town budget?
That's correct.
Thanks.
Joe?
Okay, I don't know, did you want to go through the memo that I sent out, Sean? Tom?
Joe, it's up to you how you want to go.
Okay.
This is-
What I did was I
Council
put my worksheet in the council share drive, so that you can everybody can take a look at it up here. It's, there's 43 items. I know, I know we want to get out of this as quickly as we can, as efficiently as we can, but I thought there was a few things that called to attention, and maybe we can just kind of go through them real quick. I know, I guess one of them, if I ask the right question, we can get through a lot of them. Staff default reductions, when you put SDR as far as your staff comment, would that mean that that's already taken into consideration in this new budget proposal from you?
To reach default, that's correct.
Okay. So some of the other, and that, again, is in the share drive, and there was about $908,000 worth of reductions that I took a look at. One of the things, if you don't mind me going through this one by one real quick, one of the things that said $285,000 for part-time salaries, and one of the comments that was made was it was because of transitional positions between full-time and part-time, but the savings was only $85,000 in regular salaries, so I just, 285 in extra part-time salaries and 85,000 in regular salaries saved. It doesn't equate, so I just wondered how that works out, so.
When you look at your full-time salaries, you have to increase those by contractual obligations. by our contracts.
Yep.
So that will escalate that number to where it is.
So basically, it's that you're getting, you don't have 2 or 3 of those full-time positions anymore, and those have now come down into the part-time salary line, but there may have been, increases in wages with the other remaining full-timers.
That's correct. We had,
Okay.
for FY13, we have a 3% increase for our police patrolmen and support staff. We have a 2% for the fire department, and I believe the library is 3 to 4.5%, depending upon the Boston CPI. So those will go into the full-time salary line, and that's the reason why there's not a corresponding one-to-one between the salary line and
Oh, that's
the,
that what you said, the
full-time
finance
and
department,
part-time.
the fleet manager, and the PD and all that? Okay.
and there's also some in the library as well.
Library, 110, yeah, in the library.
Right.
Okay, and then the additional personnel salaries, that was 112,000, 106 from PD. That's SDR.
Yes, that's correct.
And when you have line items, OT salary of 174,000, which is a 17% increase, that is based on all the different departments, correct? And that's just rolled into one.
That's correct.
I was able to identify and break down 2 departments that happened mostly in. Snow OT salaries, that was a 32,000 increase, so that was, when you say attempting to a realistic budget, is that based off of previous years? I mean, the things that I'm talking about here are all increases, just so the public knows. These are all increases over budget,
Proposed increases.
proposed increase.
Yeah.
So when you say, I noticed that it was a lot of realistic budgeting,
That's based upon a history of past expenditures in those areas.
all right. Something I thought I didn't realize before, again, being a freshman counselor, there's some tuition reimbursement benefit that's $20,000. That's a contractual issue as well?
That's correct.
Okay. Training benefits of $30,000. These are all increases, so I understand that there's a contractual obligation, but this is a $20,000 increase, so is that during negotiation, we negotiated something that actually made it increase by $20,000? Is that's what that means?
No, actually, majority of that, Chief Hart explained to the council and budget committee on that Saturday, is that the patrolman union has agreed to take a 1-year reduction in training and tuition available to them
Okay.
to help the town through the difficult economic period.
Okay. Now, was that in the tuition reimbursement or the training benefit?
I think it's in both, but
It's in tuition, but we also reduced the training, speaking to.
That's in his SDR, right? Okay.
Right, the tuition reimbursement was agreed to in a contract signed by the community and the collective bargaining association at $35,000. After, in the FY12 budget preparation, I went to the union on behalf of the town and asked for a concession, which they gladly agreed to, recognizing the dire straits that the community felt it was in,
Right.
of that $20,000 concession. This year, I just simply returned it to the contractually bargained for amount of $35,000. Similarly, training, we have a training budget that is mandatory. In other words, officers must complete a certain number of hours training, both with regard to the firearms and ancillary training every year.
Right.
We reduced that last year, figuring that, we might bring it in-house and find some efficiencies that way.
Okay, just to comment on that, I realize that that is part of a budget process, but
That's fine.
when you look at a 61% increase or a $29,000 increase, what we're trying to do is we're trying to, bring revenues in areas that we feel are necessary, but in other areas, we're trying to trim. And when immediately, because of the experience I've had in budgeting, when you see such a large increase, $30,000, you kind of hone in on it and say,
Well,
can we
that's
do
your
it to-
job, certainly, and I
right,
totally.
can we do it to where we were last year? Can we get by without increasing, 29,000 or 61%, or can we, do we have to have that? So these are the things that I'm kind of going through, you know what I mean? and trying to-
Well, so we're clear. You know, and I totally appreciate where you're coming from, Counselor. It's important that you go through this process, but so we're clear, that $35,000 is contractually mandated by an agreement that the community signed with the Collective Bargaining Association.
Okay.
So what it would take is for me to go back to that Collective Bargaining Association and certainly ask them. Based on my experience with them, I'm certain they'd be respectful of the dialogue, but it is contractually mandated.
All right, I'm getting confused, just one more time. Tuition reimbursement benefits is listed here as a contractual obligation,
That's correct.
and training benefits is listed as something that we can default reduction, staff default reduction? Is that right?
Tuition reimbursement is contractually mandated.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
The training expense is an expense that we manage as part of the budgeting process.
And that's what I was honing into, the 43,000 versus the 73,000 this year. So that was the 30,000 increase.
Okay, I don't have the numbers right.
$30,000 is not all yours.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
21.5 is. but-
Yeah,
Okay.
most of
And
that,
we-
just,
I'm sorry, we only see it on the cover page, but you're right, 21.5 is yours and 1,500 is fire, so.
yeah, so it's clear what that's about is, you know, these are the facts. For the last decade, we've been engaged in a war. 8 of those 10 years has been in 2 different theaters. That war has drawn the cost of, or the production of ammunition away from recreational users and law enforcement users to the military. A specific consequence of that supply and demand is that the price, and supply and demand being a well-founded economic principle, the less you have, the more it costs. And as a consequence, ammunition has gone up dramatically. What we've seen in the last 3 years is increases of 15 to 25% per annum. So, you know, that's where most of our training budget goes.
Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you very much, sorry.
Delighted to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll try to hit on some of the larger ones so that we can kind of expedite the process a little bit. Number 15 on the spreadsheet, 26% or 104,000, significant increase. And that was on cleaning and maintenance services, $104,000 increase versus budget of last year. So just wanted to, you said SDR, but I just was wondering what that means.
Well, the level being requested is a level which historically has been allocated to the Highway Department for that particular responsibility for several years. It was reduced last year in response to the budget directive as established by the town council.
Okay,
So this restores it to historical levels.
all right. And then collectively, we have 18 through 24, we have things like public educational services, 1,500, dues and sub-services, 5,900, seminars, workshops, 5,000, crime prevention supplies, 3,000, civil defense expense supplies, office supplies of 5,000, 11,000 for maintenance and repairs. Again, all things that are SDR, so those are things that are already inclusive in this number that we're
Correct.
proposing? Okay. And the gas, we reduced the gas down to 70 from 94, 873?
Well, the 74 is in the general government gas, which provides fuel for town office, police, and fire. The balance is in the highway budget, which funds the fuel expenses for the highway department.
23 public works and 72 general fund, general. So it's 94, 873, that's just strictly the fact that gas has gone up, and that's trying to be more realistic with the pricing of today?
Yeah, I mean, it's an acknowledgement that gas has chronically been underfunded on a per-gallon basis. We still consume a very level amount of fuel from year to year, so our consumption hasn't increased. It's just an acknowledgement that as I said before, every year during the budget process, everyone gets a little optimistic about the future price of gas, and our optimism never plays out, so.
So I just, I'm trying to make sure the public's aware that these are large numbers that we're, having to put into the budget to, approve this budget or pass off this budget to the voting session, but these numbers are numbers we can't get away from. $95,000 is just the fact that the gas is so much higher than last year.
Understood.
But of course, we want to still look at, when you say department expense supplies, that's like one of those areas that you're just trying to look at what you did last year and what you did this year, but $21,000 for that line is quite an increase. So could you explain, is there anything that's kind of, I know 14's from fire, but quite a hefty number.
Yeah,
41%
agreed,
increase.
and we can provide analysis for you, but department expense is essentially what it says, so it varies from department to department. So I can give you a sense of what we do fund out of those particular line items in each department.
All right, I'm getting down there, sorry, guys.
No, take your time.
Gravel supplies, which, again, as I'm going through these numbers, I want everybody to realize that these are increases versus last year. We already have numbers in there, 30,000, 40,000. This is above and beyond what the budgeted number is versus last year. So gravel supplies, I know we touched upon that. I didn't realize a 240% increase. So if somebody was to ask me, you know, really, $12,000 more for gravel? Is there a special grade gravel, or, I mean,
Now, I think that's, Janos, help me out, is that the line item in which you're planning to crush a stockpile? Could you explain that, please?
that was talked about, that's the crushing of
Yeah,
the,
this crushing.
you
of
already have the
stockpile
gravel and now
is
you,
on our yard, in our yard, and it costs $17,000 to crush the 9,000 yards of material. And that's the price, that's why you see the increase.
and I know during that Saturday, it seems to be almost like a blur now because it went by so fast, but I remember that. But I know the question then, it becomes a question now, and I'm sure some of the viewers are questioning that. If we already had the gravel, that means there should be some improvement to the expense line somewhere, but instead, we're crushing it, so it's actually more. Forget about crushing, let's buy it then, because why should we pay 12,000 more? You know what I mean?
See, but I will not, no, but I will not have, if I can crush, I can get 9,000 yards of material.
Right.
When I'll buy for 5,000, I have to pay $12 a yard. I will get much less material than I have over there right now.
Again,
So-
I mean,
And then this is material that is recycled from road construction. So this is also recycled pavement, and we are using this material for our shoulders. So this will be a stockpile of our material.
But do you understand where I'm going? I'm going with this, not to make a big deal out of this, but usually if you're taking something from another project, that you'll see a savings on one side and a charge on the other. All I'm seeing is an increase in gravel supply on here. So where's the inverse of the savings, I guess? From you grabbing the gravel and now crushing it.
Because that material will be half the cost that I will have to buy from the gravel supplier.
So this would be 24,000 ahead of last year instead of 12,000, roughly?
Well, you don't do this every year.
No, this
Right.
was just,
This-
again, we stockpile
right.
the material, now we'll have, you
So
know.
how many
stock-
years ago was it when you last probably crushed?
Well, maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
So
that we
it's an
crushed, and
expense every
that's-
3 years.
Every 3 years,
See, that,
okay, good.
that line,
He's basically, he's saving us money by taking the stuff that when he demolishes a road, he's taking it, he's bringing it back up to the barn, they put it in a pile, and then when he gets enough of it, then he brings in the machine, crushes it, and then reuses it.
You should probably do it every 2 years, so this way, every 3 years, when the new council comes on, they don't have to ask that question.
I think, I'll make a note.
Every 3 years, they're gonna ask the same question. All right, so number 30, we're almost there, guys. Machine and equipment property. Again, this is 29,300, 76.9% ahead. This is quite a lot of 17K in IT. I think we asked about that. That's new computers or software, I think, something like that.
It's new computers to get us back to historical levels.
Okay. 3 from fire, actually 10 combined, 3 from the first line of fires, and 7 from the second, and then 1 from recreation. This is just machinery that we're buying above and beyond last year's machinery. I'm just
Yeah, and we
trying
can
to-
supply you with a list of items looking to purchase.
You're gonna provide us a list of this? Okay, great. Is that the same thing that you're gonna do with the capital? Now, when it says capital lease, is this part of capital improvement projects, or?
Well, it's not capital reserve. For an example, a good chunk of the capital lease is that you may notice when the fire department's called, the captain goes out in his rig,
Right.
which is an expedition. And historically, we replace that vehicle every 3 or 4 years. I think this vehicle now is 6 years old. Because of budget reductions in past years, we've eliminated that replacement program. So we have to start thinking about replacing that vehicle, because that vehicle rolls on every emergency call for the fire department.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is add up all these things that are hitting us this year.
Sure.
That seem to be rolled over from previous years, and that's, again, now we're up to almost $300,000 just on those items alone. Number 32, other improvement property, 1,875%, 75,000. This is the 102 corridor study, that's gonna be from UFB, you said?
Yeah,
Funded,
approximately 35,000 is from undesignated fund balance, 40,000 is by taxes. And Andre, can you speak to the benefits of upgrading the corridor study on Route 102?
Good evening, Andre Guerin, Community Development Director. With regard to the Route 102 corridor plan, I believe the corridor plan was originally updated by Southern Hampton Planning Commission in the mid-90s. I think it was 1997. It was since updated in 2002, which was the last update that was done on Route 102 corridor. Given the use and given the prospect of development that could occur along Route 102, I think it behooves us to update that corridor plan to identify what improvements are going to be needed in the future, not only now into the future, obviously 10 to 20 years in the future.
So out of the 75,000, that's in that one department, right? And that's 35,000 from UFB? The rest is from tax dollar?
Yeah, this is also a separate warrant article, just for your information, so
Okay.
this will not be considered part of the operating budget or default.
Okay.
It'll be a standalone
That
article.
can be voted on?
That's
Good, so I can leave that alone.
That's
for
our
now.
proposal.
Okay. All right, and then we had senior affairs, Old Home Day increase requests. Transfer to capital reserve fund, can you explain that one for me?
Sure. You may recall, again, a separate warrant article, we spoke about attempting to keep to our schedule for replacing fire apparatus, ambulances, highway trucks, and highway equipment. And the proposal was, since we had a higher than anticipated surplus in UFB, was to reappropriate those funds into that account, recognizing that we have some significant expenses coming up in future years, predominantly a new ladder truck in about 7 or 8 years, I believe. 8 years, is it? And that truck will cost us over $1 million. So we, as discussed in my budget message, the goal was to put an infusion this year and hopefully increase the town's investment in the capital reserve program by $50,000 each year for the next 10 years. And we should be, at the end of this 8 or 9 year period, we should be funded adequately, but we have to plan on these large pieces of equipment. I think we bought the ladder truck in, was it 02, 03? Ladder truck? 03, was it? Yeah, it was the beginning of this. Yeah, so,
It was, just when Al left.
right.
We bought
So it was about 02, 03.
So that was $350,000 in the unfunded UFB?
Right, an additional infusion rights. Of that, the capital reserve is recommended to be requesting $710,000, and of that amount, $225,000 would be from taxes. The balance would be from UFB.
All right. Just to touch upon the principal other that we see here of a $95,000 increase, and you said this is an increase to principal payment. Is that something we can put off?
The bank wouldn't like it. No,
I mean, is
those-
it addition, it seemed like the way it was explained to me, it was an additional principal.
No,
Pay-
well, it
payment.
is, that's reflective, Joe, of all the bonds. Sometimes you have level payments of $100,000 a year.
Yep.
Some may go from $450 to $425. So the cumulative impact, including the bond we just sold for the roads, results in a net increase of principal payments of $95,000 for next year for all of our bonds.
Okay, so that wasn't really just something we were trying to pay down on the principal, that was something that was
No, that's a
expected.
scheduled payment, that's correct.
Okay, because again, I'm looking for any dollars we could possibly save. And the management services, I think you went into in depth, so I won't go over that. But,
Okay.
I'm just wondering the value of the televideo and the cleaning sewer lines. It's $34,000, and it's, it's probably the average Joe would say, maybe we can move that money to another year instead of putting electronics into the sewer lines when we have people that are unemployed right now. So I'm just looking at it from that point of view. Machinery and equipment, property, system improvements, is that something we can move out, $87,000 worth of improvements to our sewers?
Again, these are the sewer fund, Janos,
I
and
think sewer's self-funded.
that's correct, through sewer user fees.
Isn't there zero tax impact?
Zero tax impact?
That's correct.
Yep.
So none of that money could be, again, this is an uneducated question, but that money can't be moved into a regular fund to,
Correct.
No,
Or something else.
the sewer budget already contributes about $320,000 a year to the operating fund to pay for their share of debt service and a portion of Yanis's time and his staff's time and the office space upstairs.
because it's, and that's the same as the usage fund, the $205,000 increase?
Yanis, can you talk about the increases in the sewer fund for usage services?
Actually, Dave, before you do that,
Yep.
I have a question about the sewer fund.
Sure.
Okay. We get a net $350,000 contribution to the general fund
320.
from the 320?
Right.
Okay. Now, so that hits the revenue account, doesn't hit the
That-
expense account.
That's correct.
But if you turn to page 116 of the budget book, which is the first page of your debt service book, okay, the first bond, the Mammoth Road sewer bond, we have a $120,000 principal payment and a $52,650 interest payment, so, you know,
72.
172.6.
Sure.
Why can't that be paid out of the sewer fund, that principal and interest payment? And that would take it out of the general fund, and we can correspondingly reduce the contribution to the general fund.
Technically, they are being paid by the sewer fund through this a portion of $320,000. The reason they're within the general operating budget is that these are not revenue bonds paid for by sewer fees, guaranteed by sewer fees. All of our debt is guaranteed through our tax base by the full faith and credit of our property tax base. So they're actually technically general fund obligations, but we make sure that we review it every 3 or 4 years to make sure that we're transferring enough money from the sewer fund into the general fund to take care of debt service, and again, a proportional share of Yanis's time, John's time, Donna's time, and the space upstairs.
Okay, so we legally can't do that.
Well, I can check with the legality, we can check with our bond
Because if
advisor.
you can do that, then you've taken $172,000 out of the operating budget and and frankly, you've matched revenue with expenses like, you know, general accounting principles require you to do.
Yeah, we can do that. Again, I will check with legal counsel, but the question is that if you look at the definition of a default budget, our default budget would have to be reduced by a corresponding amount because that's a contractual obligation. So it will essentially be reduced. So if you pull it out of the operating budget, your default budget would have to be reduced accordingly.
I think also in the financial marketplace, the rate on revenue bonds is probably more than double the rate on general
Yeah.
obligation
It's
municipal
a lot
bonds.
higher. Communities use revenue bonds predominantly for like parking garages, things of that nature, which you can segment it, and it's only backed by the revenues, but the bond market realizes if there ever is a risky investment with most municipalities, they recognize that's riskier than being backed by the full faith and credit of the taxpayers.
Yeah, but you're still transferring a balance from the sewer fund.
Right.
And then putting it in a general fund, and then using that money to pay, you know, it's a
Right.
two-step process instead of a one-step process.
You know, and the weird part about that is just so if anybody, you know, has this at home, I mean, you just said 320 goes to the general revenue account. Well, 326 is the increase we're talking about here. So we're taking every bit of what goes into that general fund, and we're increasing. You're saying the 326 is still gonna come out of the sewer fund regardless, right? It's never gonna come out of,
Well, if you move the debt service over to the sewer fund,
Yeah.
then the transfer from the sewer fund to support municipal operations would be less the debt service.
okay,
So it
so,
wouldn't be 320 any longer.
All right.
Because the 320 designed to pay for that, whatever debt service we have
150.
incurred. Yeah,
Approximately, yeah.
exactly.
And it-
Still
It
150.
would appear that there would be no net gain. It'd still be an obligation, but there'd be a net loss because the rate you'd pay, the cost of money goes up in a revenue bond versus a general obligation.
Yeah, of course, now these have been floated as general obligation bonds, so you can't change those. And, you know, I don't suspect they'd have an issue with it, but there's no default budget advantage to do it because you'd have to remove that from the default budget as well. So it'd be a corresponding reduction between the proposed operating budget and the default budget. So your default number would drop by 172,000.
actually spend more money to
Right.
use the money.
Right. Yeah, it's worth
Okay.
a shot to ask.
So did you want to, since you're up here anyway, did you want to?
No, I just, you wanted to know what was in the sewer usage and why is the increase. That increase is majority for the rate increase to Manchester. Manchester will increase the rate starting January of this coming year, and we will have to have enough money to pay for the discharging the flowage to Manchester. And the rest is just basically, you know, what we paid, around $62,000 a month to Manchester, around $12,000 to Derry for discharge, plus small increases for increase of flow. And that's what makes up that $1.5 million.
So just some of these things are fixed, and I know this doesn't come out of the tax base, so I want to include that, but some of these increases that we see look astronomical on paper, but, you know, these are
Yeah,
things that we
this
can't.
is,
This
yeah,
is coming right from-
Manchester will increase the rates, and we don't have a choice, we have to pay for
Increased
it.
usage and formula changes from City
Yes.
of Manchester, right, okay, I'm sorry.
And when you were looking at the sewer machinery and equipment, this is to pay for the upgrade of Manchester treatment plant. They will be investing $78 million to an upgraded treatment plant, and we're on a hook for 10% of it. So these are the payments to pay for the upgrades.
Is this a one-time increase, or are they going to be hitting us every year?
Oh, that's every year. That's, you know, they'll be bonding, you know, every year to the different upgrades. And they'll be bonding probably $8 million, you know, on average a year. And so they'll be hitting us. So that's
That's our
a-
contribution to their
Yeah.
bond.
So that's to use the plan.
So that'll be passed to the end user.
Okay, thank you.
And then, if I might add to that gravel originally was $12,000 in 2009. Our line system, you kept reducing and reducing to 5,000. That's not enough even for us to do the shoulders. So that was also that not increase from 5 to, you know, 17, but it was originally 12. And then if you divide that, the amount of, we will probably by crashing ourselves, we probably pay 1/3. that
You
we'll
said
pay.
every 3 years, so I'm going to be here the next 2 years
Not
at least, so I'm
necessarily
going to
3
make
years,
sure
I
I
just
remind
will-
you of that.
If we'll do more work and we need
All
to
right.
put more on shoulders, will be every 2 years or 1 year.
I think also there's another piece of that. If you don't recycle that material, you're gonna have to pay to dispose of it.
Absolutely.
And
So-
some of that, especially the recaptured asphalt can be considered a hazardous
Yeah,
waste
by
if you
doing
try
this,
to.
you know, it costs us
dispose of
maybe
it.
$250, you know, a yard versus, you know, paying, you know, $750 or $8 for yard buying.
So
But I
Giannis,
want to say point, it wasn't 5,000 originally. We don't have any stockpile of material of wood to do the shoulders.
if you don't reinforce the shoulders, what happens?
Then the pavement on the edge is gonna start falling apart, and then we have to repave the road, and that's the beginning of deterioration of the road. That's why we are so particular about people not fooling around with our shoulders by putting landscaping or anything else, because that's the beginning of the cancer of the road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just 2 more? Just a little bit more explanation on the police airport division. I guess my question is, since these were negotiated and these were items that increased 40.11% because of a 10.3 rate increase, is this something that MHT will be picking up?
They're self-funded.
It's self-funded, right?
Yeah, that's totally self-funded by Manchester Airport, and it depends upon who's budgeted at the Manchester Airport as opposed to who's budgeted here. They do have a rotation, but the chief does have to identify which employees will be funded under the MHT, so we can allocate the expenses between MHT and the town.
So it just happens to be the mix that's actually going.
That would be correct, yeah. Our health insurance rates are up 10.3% this year, and our dental rates are up 0%.
It's $97,000, so that's why I'm just.
Right.
Wow, but
Yeah.
it's, again, all self-funded, not off the tax dollar?
That's correct.
Okay, then I'll be quiet then. Okay, that's all I have.
All right, Budget Committee, Todd?
Thank you. Dave, this is a question for you regarding the road reconstruction bonding versus weaning ourselves off of bonding and getting more self-funded, if you will. On the debt impact element of that, if we were to continue the bonding route year upon year, as we approach these later years, what would the debt service tax impact be? Would it just flatline at 20 cents per thousand, or does it increment up to the 29 cents per thousand? And I'm using your $1 million example.
Okay, well, if you continue to fund through the bonding, the better examples on the next page, which shows there's about a 3 to 4 cent impact, every year when you add $1 million to the, when you add $1 million to the debt service, and that's only reduced by a fraction of that, because you're paying less interest as you retire the bond. And then you start to lose some principal beginning in 2019, so essentially it goes the other way, about 3 or 4 cents a year.
So you do 10-year?
Yes, yeah, we do.
So you'll have a revolving 10-year window, where you always have a lot of it in principle on some, and then some you almost
Right.
paid down.
Yeah, the council had a policy discussion several years ago and felt it was prudent, which makes perfect sense, to don't extend out road improvements more than 10 years, because we don't end up with a situation, we had a fire truck several years ago, and it wasn't a primary piece for us, and we were still paying debt service on it. So we want to make sure that the improvements are at least longer than what the debt service is on that particular improvement.
Where I'm going with this is, I'm trying to understand, where we would be if we continue down this road in terms of tax rate impact, to have a comparison between, say, I don't know, 20 cents per thousand, or 20 versus the 29 cents per thousand. I'm thinking in terms of what the taxpayers are gonna have to pay out of their tax bill to go to wean ourselves off and have less funding available for a period of time until we can get over that hump. A, are we gonna be paying more out of our taxes every year? And B, couple that with the fact that we're not gonna be able to repair the roads like we're doing today.
Well, a couple things. If the town voted $1 million bond every year, then essentially your high water mark would be in 2018 at 37 cents.
Okay, that's the
Yeah,
question.
the
That's-
next year, 33%, it shows that essentially the first year bond is paid off, but that's gonna be replaced by an 11th year bond,
Gotcha.
if that's what you're saying. Now, on the flip side, if you go to 10 years, and essentially out of that road improvement money, you've got almost $2 million allocated to interest, which don't go into the roads, but, it's part of the cost of using somebody else's money, so,
Yeah.
they're,
And perpetually in debt, and
yeah,
and
there's
that debt
a
load can
balancing act,
carry.
yeah, sure.
Now, where I'm going with this is, and you're answering part of the question, and that's the 37 cents, that's where we peak. In 2018, we peak at about 37 cents per thousand
Right.
tax impact, versus if you continue down this funding, the target of goal of funding $1 million a year, you'd kind of max out at about 29 cents per thousand and flatline roughly there. Now, that's assuming no inflationary factors or anything like that.
That's assuming, we didn't calculate inflation, nor did we calculate a reduced tax impact, because our property tax base is increasing as well.
Okay, so it begs the question is, can we, in our town, survive the period of this trough of available funding, a lack of it, during this period of time, and how much damage is gonna happen to the roads? I guess this may be a question for Janos as well. I wanna make sure we have a proper
Sure.
balance.
I
I agree
understand.
that it's smart to wean ourselves off from the debt load, while I just don't wanna shoot ourselves in the foot at a period when debt is very cheap to come by. And I wanna make sure that we wean ourselves in a way that doesn't jeopardize the roads to the point where, okay, we all good intent, 5, 10 years down the road, we realize, okay, we did wait too long, and Janos's prediction is true, we waited too long to fix the road, so instead of X number of dollars, it's X plus Y plus Z, because it's
Right.
gonna cost you so much
Right.
more, because we waited too long. I'm just trying to balance that in my mind.
And is really, we can do some additional cost benefit for you, but really it's a value judgment by each individual taxpayers. Some taxpayers think we could spend $15 million on roads next year, and it's not enough. Some taxpayers probably feel that our roads are in good shape now. So all I can offer to you is that before we entered into the bonding cycle, is that we raised about $500,000 a year in the operating budget. So looking at the $800,000 example, is that essentially you'd have 2, 4, 6, 7 years up until 2020, when you get up to 486, where you get back to the historical level. If you look at the $1 million level, it would take you a couple of years shorter, but then again, you're raising $1/3 a year, $1/3, so it's closer to 500,000. But, it's really value judgment. I understand Janos's, chart about deterioration of roads, and And I think we all recognize that, in a perfect world, you'd spend a lot more on roads, but you've got to consider the fiscal impact upon the taxpayers as well, so
That's
long
where I
way
was
of
going.
saying, I haven't got a formula for you to tell you, that's a value judgment.
I was just trying to get a sense of the tax impact if we were to wean ourselves off versus the road impact and trying to balance the two, because I think the majority of us are probably somewhere in the middle, not on either extreme, obviously.
Yeah, yeah, right, the tax impact is an easy one for us to give you. The road impact is essentially a value judgment by each taxpayer.
I didn't know if there was any analysis that could be done based on the numbers that you provided that says, okay, what kind of elongating of time are we going to deal with in terms of just getting over this hump
Sure.
for taking care of the roads?
Yeah.
I didn't know if there's an analysis that would be.
Isn't it 5 years? If you start today, isn't it a 5-year gap before we get back up
Get back up to what level?
to where we're paying, where more of our money is now going towards towards road repairs and debt service?
Yeah, at the $1 million level, the transition point is in 2019, so it's what, for about 6 years. At the $800,000 level, that transition is 2020, so that's essentially where the line is. I
So
think
basically,
the question I think is a little bit different as to what's the impact on the time in which you're building that back up, and the resources available, so.
Yeah, I'm trying to minimize tax impact
Sure.
while
No, I
not
understand.
jeopardizing totally
Right.
the road infrastructure for too long of a period of time. I want to make sure that to get
Sure.
over the hump, we're not going to do
Sure.
ourselves more damage in the not-so-long run, meaning if we're not careful and we short fund ourselves in the short run, is that going to cause us to expend more? Because in 7 years from now, guess what? Now we realize we've waited too long, so maybe 12 or 13 years out, now we have a $20 million
Sure.
bond we're going to need for
Sure.
something.
So
Let
that
me,
was
get together
Giannis's
with-
presentation 5 years ago. So what he did was, just a little historic on it. It's been 10 years he's been talking about roads. First he started at 60 million.
Oh,
then
no,
he
you
started
don't.
at 30 million. Giannis, just let me tell the story. Okay?
He's creeping up.
He showed a 30-year cycle of roads and what it would cost us, what we waited versus not waiting and everything else. The council each year during the budget cycle would look at what we were going to spend on roads and say, it was kind of like the old SRO story. It went first. So we historically didn't do anything with roads. What the Public Works put together was they showed the deterioration of roads over several years. This was explained in great level of detail over the first 2 years to the voters. Then it went to the ballot. Is it 5 years in a row it's passed? So for 5 years, every year, the townspeople go there and they say, you know what? We agree, we don't want the roads to deteriorate in town. The argument Janos has made over and over again is fine. If you want to give me the money in the operating budget, fine. But if you're going to give me no money, which could very well happen if we go to the deliberative session, okay, then I would rather have the opportunity to convince the voters that I'm going to save them. I think the number was something like $30 to $40 million over a 25-year period if I maintain the roads over that period of time versus ignoring roads over 7, 8, 9 years and then having to come in and not have the opportunity to pave over the roads. I'm going to have to reconstruct every road. So that was, and then he can talk about drainage for the next 45 hours, okay? But that is the argument that was made 5 years ago, and he's not going to make any different argument now. He's going to make the same argument, right? So that's really what you have to weigh here. The voters have said for 5 years, we want to build roads. What Tom is saying is, hey, voters, let me educate you. This is what you're going to pay if you keep going down this path. That's the balance.
And when you talk about tax rates, we've been cheating, frankly, because you pulled the first year payment out of the UFB each one of every 5 years, right? So the taxpayers didn't pay the $50,000, didn't hit their tax rate that year.
But eventually they pay.
Well, no, they paid in the past.
They prepaid it.
They prepaid it, but, you paid $26,000 in insurance costs every year
Bonding costs.
on a bond that just, you didn't get any value on your streets for that.
Now, the big reason we did it, the big reason the council at that time did it is because they said, okay, we've heard enough about roads for the last 7 or 8 years. Let's put it to the voters and see what they want. Voters spoke. They wanted roads.
And plus the fact we cheated him, because we kept hitting his repair budget every year.
Yes, we did.
You're right, that was all part of,
the operating
all
budget.
part of how that council came to that conclusion.
Yeah.
I
That's
guess
we
what
kept
I'm
going
trying
through.
to just figure out is,
So you
all
got,
right,
so it's, all right, it's pay me here or pay me here, is what Janos is saying. I don't care where you pay me, but pay me, because if you don't pay me, it's gonna cost you double.
what I'm trying to figure out is you can pay me here or you can pay me there. Which one's more and what do we get for bang for buck? I'm just trying to figure out, get the best bang for the buck in the period we have to
Maybe
deal
another way of looking at it is, if he had allocated to him $1 million for road repair, but out of that road repair budget, that included his debt service, then you'd see it go down. After 5 years, he would get more money towards road repair. He'd start picking up $150,000 a year after 5 years.
Sure, and that would increase too, because we can't expect the interest rates on debt load to continue at the levels
Well,
they have today.
but frankly, municipal
Don't really
debt's
have,
kind of
yeah.
flat. It's been what it is. It's, in fact, you know, it's 3% or less.
And then you can use the other theory. We'll make this move, we'll try correcting it, and then everybody will start seeing the increase in their taxes, and they're like, oh, we can't do this. This is how it goes, I'm telling you.
That's what I'm trying
You're
to,
gonna
It's
put the
a
money back
winning
in.
proposition because it's a smart thing to do. It's smart fiduciary responsibility.
You're gonna put the
But-
money back in, and it's gonna fail. Okay, because it's gonna be higher than default, and he'll have no money. And then he's gonna say to you, you got what you got.
Yeah, now what are you gonna do?
That's the balancing act.
Yeah.
so what do you think? You think you should just leave the bond, continue with bonding, or what's your bottom line? Because I'm not sure it's clear.
What's my bottom line?
No, what are you trying to say?
I just gave you the options, okay? It's not my bottom line, it's the voters' bottom line. What do they want to do? Okay? Janos is going to tell you what he wants to do. He wants to keep fixing roads.
Yeah.
If I can I
I think I got to go.
I think you summarized this very well, but I just would like to add only that the assumption that maybe that $1 million is sufficient amount of money to maintain the roads, that is such a bad assumption. That's a drop in the bucket what we really need. Just to maintain the roads, just to shim and overlay, I need twice that amount of money. That's to keep the 12-year cycle, not 69-year cycle. That does not include the construction. So assumption that you're making that is enough and, oh, we can survive the dip. We are barely surviving with $1 million. So that's only what I wanted to add. That's not very much money being put into the roads.
Is he the best straight man ever?
Well, Janos, can you just, I have one question. real quick.
what you asked
Sorry, I know.
You got your slides?
Just remember, if we.
I think Mr. Jonkis is asking the question, and I think you're probably the best person to answer this. We've already taken a look at how the financial aspect of it will go, but what is your best assumption as to how we can transition going away from bonds?
Like
And
asking a crack.
as far as what, do we already figure out the dollars that we'll need to transition, or have we gone into that yet?
No.
No, I don't think, nobody, like Dave said, there could be a 1,000 scenarios how you want to transition that.
I mean, I heard that
And
you
then-
need $1 million, but if you, what's the number that's
$1
gonna?
million
He
was
he
already.
said 2
$2
million.
million, right?
Yeah, see, that's only for shim and overlay to keep a 12-year cycle, just like painting your house. You should paint or whatever house every 5 years, otherwise it's going to deteriorate. So if you go wait longer, you're going to be replacing the siding. So the same thing's happening with the roads. And this money, what we are talking about, is reconstructing the old roads that they are sitting under, the council is sitting under the roads that we, for 2-3 years, we paved them because we couldn't plow them. They were falling apart. A road like Wilson Road requires a lot of money, but we just could not plow, so we just paved them, shim and overlay. So there was a lot of money invested just to survive at 4 or 5 years. This will come back. I'm talking about the bunch of money that is needed just to maintain it, just painting, not talking about reconstructing that. Now this $1 million is going to reconstruction. And you know that our program was 1.5, it was reduced to by 1/3.
Yeah, the CIP
to 1
said
million.
no.
So we are, if we keep reducing that dip, you know, of 500 for 5 years or 100, 200, it's a drop in the bucket. We are fooling ourselves thinking that somehow saving this, we are leaving for the next generation 4 or 5 times more expense.
Then where's your answer? When do you cut off bonding? What's the year that you cut it off?
Or what
Because,
year do we
because
take
you're
that?
not, because you're frankly, your department isn't paying for this. If we said to you, you can have a bond every year, but you take the debt service out of, just the interest, you take the interest out of the rest of your department, would you like that? Obviously not, would you?
Now, so let's propose the bond that would be a $10 million bond, $15 million bond, and spread that for the several years to do the construction. Just like normally towns are doing. They don't take bond for 1 year and from year to year. They will take their road bond for $12 million, and because the majority of the towns, when you look around, it requires $25–30 million to bring the infrastructure to the conditions that is reasonable.
But you're not answering the question. How many years do we go out with your proposal of $1 million a year? Because you're not getting $30 million.
And then you start over.
How-
This is like my children asking for a toy at Toys R
Well,
Us.
but it may be, but it's a serious question.
It is a serious question, but I said, what conditions road do you want in town? Like he's pointing, I would like to reconstruct them all.
You know, we'd all like things better, but we have to live in the world of there's taxpayers who don't want an increase. You know, budgeting is allocating scarce resources. And while, you know, you've been getting the $1 million and you've been doing great with it, some of us, at least me, think the better way to do it is to fund repairs out of the operating budget and not bond it. Because I think the worst thing to do is to pay interest. You know, getting $1 million in road repair is great. Paying $1.2 million for it, I think, isn't great. Especially when it's not my money, it's the taxpayers' money. So I think, you know, we need to transition to where we're paying the operating, out of the operating budget.
I don't disagree with you at all that putting an operating budget is the place to put. But it was taken away several years ago, and it was put into the will bond this. Otherwise, all underfunded items were being paid from that line for years. Where would you take the money? You couldn't take from a payroll, you take it, or let's go to Janusz's cookie jar, take the money from the roads, and always was, you know, so I never had that $600,000 to pay for reconstruction because I had to cover other items throughout the town. So right now, if it's in bonding, at least it goes only to roads. So that's, I see it's a safe area, but I agree, it should be in the budget.
So-
Yeah, there was, we just got a history lesson in the last 5 years or whatever. Let me take you back a little further. We used to fund road maintenance out of the operating budget, and my memory serves right, a decade or so ago, it was in the tune of about $500,000, which was the operating budget line item. But we found we were losing ground for two reasons. One, Janusz just explained it, having that large of a line item, it was too tempting that when you ran out of salt or when you ran out of overtime for a particular department, that's, you know, we run a balanced budget. That was the cookie jar, so to speak, where we went. And the balance that Janusz was left with to repair the roads never was what we budgeted. It was always something less than that. So then there was a structural change in our budgeting, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, where we said, you know what, we could get ahead of the game here, and we could fence off that money two ways. One, we could take maybe $150,000 of that, instead of having a $500,000 line item, we have a $150,000 line item, which would pay for our $1 million bond. And by the way, when you have that bond, you can't spend it on overtime or on salt or any of that stuff. You have to spend it on road repairs. So that kind of fenced that money off from the rest of the budget. It also changed the tax impact from $500,000 to $150,000. I don't think it was ever envisioned that that would be a recurring thing for as long as it's been. I don't think we thought that far ahead at that time. But that was a structural change in the budget back in the 2003-04 time period, I think, if memory serves right. So the immediate benefit back then was reduce the tax obligation by about $350,000 and get, instead of something less than $500,000 worth of road repairs, we were getting $1 million worth of road repairs.
So now this pendulum's swinging the other way as to, gee, now we have some accumulated interest, now how are we gonna deal with it going forward? So that's a little bit extended history lesson.
It's like buying a car at full price. You buy a car for $50,000. You're not really gonna have a $50,000 car as soon as you drive it away, because you're gonna owe more than the car's worth. Everybody goes through it if you finance a car. It's a losing proposition no matter what you do. So really, it does become basically a philosophical thing. But not only that, it does become a cost factor because the way we're doing it now, it does fence it off. And I think that was the biggest thing that I've seen through the years, and this is even before I sat on the budget committee, was it was very tempting to take that money and move it somewhere else. And, you know, it's tough.
So what we're saying, for the numerically inclined like me, as of 2018, you mean that these $1 million bonds, basically all we're going to do is keep borrowing, and by the time 2019 comes, we're only going to have 157,900 to use towards actual road construction? Is that how that works? If you keep on taking $1 million bond? I'm trying to understand the 10-year bonding cycle. So this means that we start in 2006, and then we keep taking $1 million every year. And by the time, if we continued that through 2016, by the time we got to 2018, we'd have no money because we'd be using all that bond money to actually just pay for the debt impact?
Well, actually, you'd have to use the bond money for the road.
Right.
The expense would go against the default budget. The default budget would continue to climb by that amount.
Right, in 2018, you'd run out of money, pretty much.
Or you go the other way. It all depends. It depends on what the voters do.
But
The voters may say, you know what, roads look good, and it's done. I don't know what they're gonna do.
I guess what I'm saying, I guess my point is if we continue with this, I know there's been some discussion about it, and I just want to make sure it's not over everybody else's head like it had been before for me. When you continue to take $1 million in bond money every year, at some point, your debt impact or your debt services, I guess I call it, how much you're actually paying towards that bond, eats into that money that you're actually getting for the roads. So at what point is that what that means, 2018, or is that just because you stopped bonding?
Well, that was just that was the example we provided, that just picked out a 10-year cycle of bonds and then transitioned from, that's not the answer. That is an answer, but that's not the answer. That just provides an example as the impact if you extended your bonding out till $1 million. Of course, I think we all recognize that the voters will tell us. When the voters feel that, I respect the honest opinion, but the voters will tell us when they feel the roads are adequate enough, and at some point, I suspect they'll stop approving road bonds. They may not. They may next year. They may in 15 years. But at some point, we've had experience of that in the past, where we've had a number of successful bonds for a particular goal, and at some point, the citizens, I guess, collectively said, we've allocated enough town revenues for that particular purpose. The answer may be made for us.
How long does it take to pay off the $1 million bond?
They're all 10-year. They're all 10-year terms.
So I guess what I'm saying is if we keep borrowing $1 million, there's gonna be a point where that $1 million bond is actually just paying for the interest on all the bonds that we have out there, right, at some point? If we keep adding a bond every year for the next 20 years, there's gonna be,
Remember,
Well,
the
you-
bonds fall off, too.
they fall off
Yeah.
every 10 years, right?
Well, your total bondable interest,
Every
11th
year
year,
they
one
fall
falls off, 12th year, one
under a 10-year scenario, the community will pay a total of $1.9 million in bonds. So under your thought process, 2 of those years essentially pay for the interest of the 10 years in totality.
Because I see one of the charts here that says how much is actually going towards the road reconstruction itself. It dwindles down. Is that because of the fact that we have to keep paying for that debt service, or?
Which chart are you looking at, Joe?
I think it was the first one you gave us.
Mhm.
Second. Where it has $1 million on the 2023. See, it says goal 1 million, and it keeps going down.
Right.
Is that because we are paying more towards the debt service? I guess I understand it's 10 years, one drops off, then you get another one, but what is it that you're actually paying, almost as much you're getting that $1 million, but you're actually paying $300,000 of that million just to try to pay for the other bonds that are owed.
Well, if you look at, again, the first example, the page which shows a goal of $1 million, 800,000 for an investment of roads, whether it be principal interest, and also actually funds towards, on an annual basis, towards improving roads, is the second column. You have the year, bonded principal, bonded interest, and that interest gives you the allocation of that set goal towards interest costs. So essentially, that's costs that are not, cannot be invested directly into roads, because that's a carrying cost and the cost of using someone else's money. Okay, so what you'll see is that currently is that our highest bonded interest is 128,000, which is 2012, and then it goes down incrementally from there until, you know, your lowest payment is $1,500 in interest in the year 2022.
But is that because bonds fall off, is that why?
Yeah, you can see between 2018 and 2019, the bonded principal goes from 570 to 450.
Yep.
That reflects where you first, the bond which you, was approved back in 2008 has now been paid off.
Hey,
Okay.
Dave,
I'm sorry, so just,
I want to put the freeze on this. So we have a bond hearing December 28th, which is designed specifically for all the bond issues.
okay.
So let's go back to the budget.
Well, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
what I believe the counselors are saying is that this, if Tom was able to say, we need to not go down this path of continued bonding, he would be advocating we need to put some money into the budget, which will not be the default budget, it will be the budget we present. So that question has to be answered. If we're not going to do that, then the bond hearing will be the bond hearing.
And that'll be it. And
Right.
then we'll be left
But
with
if
zero.
we're going
you know.
to add $700,000 into the budget, then we gotta figure out what that is. I think that's what Tom's saying.
I think that's probably accurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll need, to that end, I'll need a decision from the council by either tonight or Thursday whether to schedule a bond hearing.
Well, if we, let's say we have that bond hearing, and let's say the results of that bond hearing is no bond, we're still within time period that we could go back and change the operating budget to put something in there for road construction in the operating budget, right?
Yeah, your bond hearing is scheduled for December 28th, which also you'll have to finalize your deliberative session budget and warrant for your second hearing. So, yeah, I mean, that's essentially the drop dead date to make a decision whether you want to go forward with a bond or include something in the operating budget. But in order to consider the bonding option, you'd need to tell me Thursday whether to schedule for a bond. I mean, the safest way, frankly, is to have a bond hearing anyway. And at that point, you can decide whether to proceed with a bond or not proceed with a bond. And it's, you know, you have that choice.
Well, the scary thing is, honestly, now that John mentioned that, because I didn't even think of that, I just thought of it as the bond, I didn't think of it as hitting the budget. It's very possible that bond might lose, and then we'll have nothing. So, I mean, realistically, I guess,
That's been our situation for the last couple of years. We've had bonds out there with no,
no backup.
in the
Right.
past, we had put contingency warrant articles on, so if the bond failed on Tuesday, on Saturday, we could,
Wipe it out.
we could vote an article to add $400,000 back into the operating budget. Now, the last couple of years, we've kind of run naked in that regard.
But in the last couple of years, it was conceivable that a motion could have been made to add an X number of dollars to the highway budget if the bond had failed. Under our new form of government, we don't have that option anymore. Because we won't know when the voters make their decisions on what the entire community is gonna vote on by ballot, we won't know the outcome of the bond vote.
Now, we had talked about the legality, I'm not sure if we got a final reading on it, whether we could have competing warrant articles on the ballot, that one would say bond $1 million, other would say add $500,000 to the operating budget. Are we still not sure?
We haven't received a final answer on that yet, but we will have that for Thursday.
Well, I kind of don't remember what we did for contingency, but what was the contingency bond? How much was the amount?
The
Was that
warrant
half a million?
It was a warrant article to the operating budget.
A couple of years, it was 200,000. I don't know if it was a half a million or not. You know, DRA at that point said,
Are we
know,
getting any
it-
matching funds from them still? So if we put on 250,000, do they match it still?
no, we receive highway aid from the state for about 600,000.
Mm.
And it's gonna be used for highway purposes.
Mhm.
So you could use that to pay for your highway crew to maintain the roads, but it's gonna be allocated. So essentially, your total highway budget can't be less than the revenue you receive, and we're well past that. You know, DRA's position previously was, under the other form of government, was if the voters, you couldn't automatically say to the voters on Saturday, the bond passed on Tuesday, so we're not gonna consider this article. Town meeting would have to vote to do that, to table it or to defeat it. DRA's position was, if the bond passed on Tuesday,
That's principle.
the voters could conceivably say, we want another $200,000 in funds on Saturday, you'd have to fund both of them.
Sounds like the free lunch question on the school side.
Yeah, so see, my concern here is, like, just for the purposes of this conversation, the town manager's budget's almost 27 million. The default budget is 2.4 million. If we add $1 million, you know, and not run the bond, then we're at almost 28 million versus 2.4 million. So what I heard Janos say here is that in this form of government, I'd rather take my risk on a bond on my own for roads and go to the voters versus go to the voters with a $28 million budget versus a 2.4 million default, because he probably thinks he knows how that would turn out.
Yeah, but
That's what I got from his conversation.
What's the 2.4 million?
What the council Tom
Excuse
said.
me, the
26.
20,
Still have the
20,
additional-
almost 28,
We still have the
26.4.
additional
What did the
amendment there,
bond,
right?
what did the bond pass
Did-
out
oh,
last
did I?
year? Do you
I'm
remember
sorry.
what percentage?
I'm sorry?
Remember what percentage the bond passed out last year?
It was close to 68, 70, which I might add was the first year the assistant director was providing the information at town meeting and not Janos, so.
I did the show on TV before.
You need 60% to pass.
You need 60, and it was the high, seriously, it was the highest, and I think it was in the upper 60s, wasn't it about 67, 68% last year? Meg, do you remember? Yeah. So-
Yeah, it changed several years ago from 2/3 to 3/5.
But that was a good cushion.
It was, yes, that's correct.
last year. It's
It
just
was.
Just curious,
Right.
if it was 61%,
No, it was not that low.
So Janos, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Come on up.
Dave, isn't this a little premature, though? We're not sure if we can actually put it as a separate line item for the voters?
One thing for sure, you can put a separate line item. I suspect what DRA is going to tell you is that if the voters are voting at one time now, so if they approve both the bond and the appropriation, I'm not sure DRA will say, well, since Article 2 passed, Article 10 is void. I think they're probably going to tell us, you have to fund both of them, but I need clarification
We
from
can't
legal
say
counsel on that.
if Article 10 doesn't pass, then we can,
Yeah, again, I will check. In the
I would-
past, DRA has said, you know, whatever the voters approve, they
I would
approve.
hope
I know.
that we could put make it explicit and put language on the ballot stating that.
right.
That if Article 2 passes, then this article is null and void.
Again, we'll get clarification, but in the past, DRA has had heartburn with that approach.
I understand.
They want a very black and white approach at the ballot.
Okay, so here's my thought. So my thought was this. What if the council and the budget committee came up with a number of, I don't know, 350,000, put it into the budget the old way, like we used to, and instead of budgeting $1 million, we budget something less, meaning we'll go to instead of $1 million bond, we do a $500,000 bond.
You're still faced with the same issue of that you can't put it into the default budget because the default budget is set. So it will probably bring you in with a budget that's higher. So if I was the department head, I would say, I'd still rather go for the bond because
It would be less money on the
more than
tax
likely in
rate.
this economy, people are
The
going to vote for
chances
the
that people will
default budget.
vote for default budget is much more than they will vote for higher budget. And then I will not have a chance at all to at least convince the people about need of keeping the road reconstruction and
the other
maintaining infrastructure.
The other issue is the administrative costs of floating the bond are pretty level. So your ability to amortize those costs over a real small bond makes it a more expensive transaction.
Sue, I don't know. if
Even,
you can-
yeah, $1 million is
And
probably the
I don't
smallest you can.
wanna, I don't even wanna belittle it and go down that road and figure it out. That, I understand the logic behind it is,
Yeah,
you can't
Tom's
argue with
point
it.
earlier is that, do you want to spend $25,000 in administrative costs for a $500,000 bond? I mean, it's,
Dave, could we set a separate road maintenance trust article and fund it with $300,000?
My sense is yes, but let me make sure.
And that way, it couldn't be touched except for road maintenance, so Janos couldn't have it rated.
And then on the
Either
side,
trust fund or capital reserve fund, but I know.
that's a great idea. I think we talked about that before, right? So, then maybe to try to expedite this then, so from what I'm hearing is, we don't wanna add anything to the budget. You're gonna look at the option of putting it into a trust fund. We can try to look at that and see if that's an option. Maybe that gets us weaned off it. And at this time, maybe, if you're looking for direction, I mean, we'll go through the rest of the budget committee, obviously, but from the council side of it, maybe we can come up with at least an agreement that, let Janos go forward with his 1 million, try to convince the voters, and if they say no, they say no. And hopefully, we can set up the road maintenance trust fund, and that'll be a funding mechanism that we can maybe look to try to,
For the next few years, yeah,
Yeah.
starting that, but this year still.
And that,
keeping
and
the
that
bond.
also, by proxy, might also start the process of us weaning off of the bonding.
We can have options for you for Thursday. You can
Okay,
look at
is
it.
that something we can, all right?
Yeah, but I'm not gonna be here Thursday, but, so I wanted to
Yeah.
ask one question real
Yep.
quick. So if the bond doesn't pass, say that we have it there, the bond doesn't pass, how much of this money are we actually saving, through the interest? Is
Those are
it,
existing, so it would
Not-
be
Almost nothing.
Nothing, yeah,
nothing.
because it's already, yeah.
Don't
it's
pay
already-
anything back.
right.
Yeah.
so whatever we put into that trust, that's all he has, he doesn't have,
Correct.
okay.
Right, yeah. But again, looking toward the future, if that's the route we end up going and the voters have had enough of passing $1 million bonds, then that's what we can do. And there's nothing to say that we can't increase that as we go along. Because that's what trust fund, maintenance trust funds are exactly what you put into it. And, you could always keep funding it to a higher degree or higher level. What you're taking for the money to put it into the, into the vehicles, we could take X amount of money from undesignated fund balance and put it into that and increase it that year. It all depends on if you have a good year or not, and, but hopefully things will pick up enough in the future that we can do that. So, and if we have any luck with the luck tax and get that put back into the default budget to whatever degree that amount of, money is, we can take that money and put it towards roads.
It's an option,
So, anyway.
it's an option.
It's something to think about. Okay, so that's that. Let's go back to the budget committee. So we're at Todd, working our way down to Lisa.
I'm all set
You're good for now?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else in the budget committee? Yep.
I just had one comment, to take a look at this. When you look at the overall picture, right now, our debt service is 10% of the total budget. That's a big number.
Yep.
That means 90 cents on the dollar is only going to run the town.
Yeah,
So-
and just for a point of information, our allowable debt service, our debt service now is about a quarter of the allowable debt service. I never recommend to the council and to the community to bond, we can bond 3% of our assessment base, which is about $100 million. But frankly, to your point, debt service on $100 million would be unsustainable. Absolutely.
So I don't know what the sustainable percent is, but the taxpayer's getting 90 cents on his dollar in running the town. So it's just something I just wanted to throw out
And
there.
that's just the town, that's not the school.
That's. yeah,
That's a
just what we-
whole different argument.
Right, but I'm just saying, just keep in perspective, that 10% of the budget is just going to debt service as we sit right now.
All right, he's paying,
And I don't know whether that's projected to go up or down. There's a $23,000 increase right at the present, I think, for this year.
Right.
You had a decrease in the interest,
yeah,
and I don't know if that's to a specific, for a specific reason.
well, we presented a slide, which I don't have with me tonight, I apologize, on Saturday, which shows the last 4 years, and our debt service allocation has been reasonably consistent within $50,000 to $75,000 every year for the last 4 or 5 years. So it's been consistent. Looking forward, You know.
Well, adding another bond obviously is going to change that.
Yeah, I mean, but some bonds will fall off, so looking forward, I mean, I can envision the town capital needs on the town side as being, attending to renovation/expansion of central fire, looking at Pettingill Road, however that shakes out in the future, and then the perennial questions of road bonds, open space bonds. But beyond that, you know, we've been very fortunate in that the community taxpayers have supported attending to a lot of our needs with North Fire, South Fire, this building, and police. So we're pretty much wrapped up with capital projects on the town side for the foreseeable future.
The only thing I saw dropping off, I may be wrong on this, was about 700,000 in the next 2
We
years.
got about 400,000, my recall is.
There's a 300,000 one next year, and then-
FY 14, right.
Yes, within
Right.
2 years. Well,
Right.
yes, another year.
But beyond that, it's just incremental
Right.
declines.
And there's been very little coming to the CIP. There's been no appetite for the CIP or the planning board entertaining large bonds.
There's a number of different sources of funding that comes into the community, whether it be revenue sharing from the state, whether it be revenues from motor vehicle registrations, property taxes, so forth, and also bonds. That's a source of revenue. And as you run the community, run the town, you weigh those different revenue sources, given the needs of the community and also the marketplace. When interest rates are 10, 15%, you try to, as much as you can, pay as you go, because you don't want to pay those kind of, the cost of money is too high. When the interest rates are low, and right now they're historically low, and the lowest they've been in probably 40 to 50 years, then that revenue source tends to be more palatable because the cost of money is so cheap. So as a portion of our revenue stream is through bonding, the goal in a continuum of year-over-year budgets is to hopefully get to a point where bonds are maturing and coming off the books as new bonds are added to the books. And if there is a period of time when interest rates skyrocket, if we can, if the needs of the community are such that we can avoid bonding altogether because of the cost of money, then that's a good way to go as well. So I mean, I think it's not practical to say we'll pay everything with cash. I mean, most people don't run their households that way. We don't run the town that way. But on the other hand, we don't want to be addicted to cheap money and do things that we probably don't need to be doing. So there's a balance there. So we have to consider, I don't know, 7 or 8 different factors and how we mix and match our revenue sources.
Okay, Budget Committee? John?
Dave, on the first page of the second page in the memo, it says that should the voters opt for the default budget, the following budget components will be removed from the budget and funded. Under police department, I think on public works, there are contractual provisions in there.
Hey, John, can you do me a favor? Microphone? Thanks.
My question was, Dave's memo talks about elimination or removal of things from the budget if the voters opt for the default budget. And some of the things in there talk about contractual obligations, tuition reimbursement for the fire and the clothing allowance for public works. How does that work? I mean, are we still on the hook for those, or there are opt-out provisions?
Well, they're not opt-out provisions. Essentially, we would fund it at current levels, which are lower than contractual. If we are required to provide the total, the maximum contractual amount, then we have to find money from other line items in the budget, because those are contractual items.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions for now? I'd like to probably open it up to the public. Okay. All right, this time we'll open it up to the public. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to this? Mike, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike Brown, 5 Carousel Court. I jotted some thoughts down on paper, so if you'll indulge me, I'd prefer to kind of just read from that. It's just some general comments and thoughts that I have as an individual resident and taxpayer, and it's similar to the comments I shared with the Budget Committee when they had their kickoff meeting this year for the budget process. I'll try to make it as concise as possible. First of all, I do want to thank the council and the Budget Committee that's here tonight for the opportunity to provide public comments regarding the FY13 budget. The process is challenging and lengthy, as everyone here knows, and I certainly appreciate the willingness of the council members and Budget Committee, as well as Dave and his staff and the department heads in terms of their role in this, and I appreciate the time and effort everyone puts into it. As a longtime resident, which is 21 years at this point, and an individual taxpayer and a former member of these two bodies, I strongly believe that engaging with your elected officials in person in this kind of a forum is the single best way to participate in this process. It's not easy. You have to make the effort, but I think it's the best way to do it. And more importantly, it's the only way that I know of where you can try to influence the outcome, which is what I'm here to do, to influence the outcome for myself as an individual taxpayer. So that's why I'm here tonight. And I do plan on attending as many of the budget workshops and hearings as I can to the best of my ability. With that said, my views and preferences for the FY13 town budget as just one of your constituents is as follows. I do believe that many residents in town feel similarly to someone like myself, but I also know that you need to balance my feedback against the feedback you're going to receive from hopefully many others during this process. Hopefully tonight when I sit down, someone else will come up. In my personal opinion, last year I thought was a defining moment for the town budget in a positive way. The FY12 budget that was presented to the voters was dramatically lower than prior years, even after taking into account the contractual obligations that everyone's kind of talked about tonight, known as the default budget. The magnitude of the reduction was on the order of approximately 1.3 million. I could be off. Dave can correct me on that. It's from my old notes. From a tax rate perspective, this significant effort led to no increase on the town side of the tax bill, which is 1/4 of what represents the tax bill. I view it as a paradigm shift. Why did it happen? How did it get accomplished? I can only speak from my experience here last year with the position I had, that simply put, a consensus was reached by the policymakers early on in the budget process, actually before it got underway, that we wanted, but better yet needed, to deliver a flat tax rate to the community for FY12. Given the gravity of the economic downturn that was affecting our constituents. As everyone knows, we gave direction to Dave to essentially bring back a budget that did that accomplished that goal. And in the end, with the support of the Budget Committee, it was ultimately passed at town meeting, at the polls. There were several changes made to that budget along the way. There were puts and takes, and there was even some additions on the floor of town meeting. But the end result that was presented to the voters at the ballot box was still a flat tax rate. In my personal opinion, that was a major, major accomplishment, and more importantly, a shift in the right direction, okay, from my perspective, for the following reasons. The depth of the state and national economic downturn, the loss of jobs and incomes as a result of that downturn. There's been a subsequent decline in personal earnings for a large portion of private sector workers. No raises, some for several years. I can speak personally on that, but I know others can as well. And it should be noted that the vast majority of the taxpayers in this town are private sector workers. That is your constituency from a broad perspective. A precipitous decline in the housing market. Foreclosure rates that we hadn't seen in our community for a long, long time. Very unfortunate thing. Energy was mentioned, skyrocketing costs of energy, which we've now kind of adapted to, if you think about it, not only at the gas pumps, but for heating our homes. And the significant hit that most, if not all of us, have taken in our personal savings portfolios for the future. So I personally believe that all of those factors weighed heavy during the budget process last year, and more importantly, I think that was the genesis for the goal for the flat tax rate, okay? I believe the majority of the taxpayers in town truly appreciated that effort, okay? They didn't come out of the woodworks, they didn't slap us on the back, but I'm quite sure that they really appreciated that, given the circumstances. It wasn't an easy task to accomplish, as some of the people in this room know, and however, I think it was indeed a worthwhile effort and an honorable effort. With that said, I strongly believe that the same set of economic circumstances we faced last year exist as of tonight. There's no marked difference that I see personally or in my business that we're not facing those exact same situations. And yet we're looking at a budget that not only is not below default, but is well above it, okay? I.e., the flat tax rate is not even kind of on the table at this point. And a short 12 months later, I just don't see an argument being made that the economic situation has dramatically turned around to the positive, okay? So, you know, I think those circumstances should be taken into account by the council, the budget committee, and the town manager going forward. My personal preference is just one of your taxpayers, one constituent, speaking strictly for myself. I don't represent any group. It's just Mike Brown, is that I'd like you to collectively work towards the same goal as last year. Okay, that's what I'm requesting. I'm requesting a flat tax rate again for the same reasons that we did it last year. Okay? I do want to throw one data point out, because I do plan on participating in the school side of the budget process, because it is representative of the tax bill that we all receive. Their proposal for FY13 is approximately $400,000 below default, okay? So I think the town should work towards that as well. Right now, I am inclined to vote for the default as an individual taxpayer, you know? And I don't see anything really changing that perspective, and I think most people would do the same. So I think you should work down towards that and hopefully go below it. And I thank you for allowing me to present my comments, and I thank you for the time.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
No, is that the one below default?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to comment? Okay.
I have one comment on that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is there any way, Dave, that you can give us an idea of what are the things that, I mentioned several of them on my 25-minute rant, but...
It was longer than 25 minutes.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I promised him 15 and I went 10, so he was really mad. That basically are the reasons why we can't get to zero. I mean, there were negotiations that were, you know, 0 for this year and then 2% next year. I mean, there were things that were negotiated as part of the zero flat tax rate last year that we were able to achieve, that it's impossible for us to get to that point this year. Is there a possibility that we can list some of those things for us? I mean, I don't know if it's something we could share or what, so I don't know. There are several of them. I mean, we went over 5 or 6 of them tonight with the 43 items that I had, but I know even in the negotiations and contractual negotiations we have, there were percentages that we just had to go up based on last year's.
But there were takeaways that Dave, by the council's directive, there were takeaways that still provided no increase. He factored in the contractuals and then took away accordingly. He had to make his adjustments to meet the goal of the flat tax. So,
Last year?
yes.
Okay, so what I'm saying is this year, we're left with those increases. So last year, when you guys negotiated.
We're left with the contractual increases and what Dave's presented to us for increases.
Right.
And some of them are things that, you know, he already explained to you what he feels we need to add back and the reasoning for it. Some of it is stuff that has been cut and reduced for a number of years or maybe last year. And so that's kind of his thought process on it. So-
And I know we're talking about the budget here, but I'm talking about also some contractual things that were negotiated last year, right? That was 0, and then 2 this year, and then 2% next year, and then, so what I'm saying is, it's just for clarification purposes, because as Mike.
There was one contract last year.
As Mike said, that when he came up to the mic, I mean, that's really, we're all trying to get to a flat tax rate, but there are things that are standing in the way. I'd like to eliminate those things, but because of contractual obligations, we can't.
Yeah, I mean, we can give you for Thursday a written analysis of, you know, what it would take to get to a flat tax rate and the realistic consequences of that. And, you know, I totally understand the directive given to staff for the last couple of years, actually, is to get the flat as possible. And to do that, we've reduced staffing levels whereby now, and, you know, we'll set this out for Thursday, you know, we're a minimum staffing for some of the statutory responsibilities. We've got registered cars, we've got registered voters. And so, you know, to get to that goal from last year, we've really reduced our staff in all departments. And so, you know, frankly, I know what the memo's gonna tell you. It's gonna say you can get there this year. It's gonna impact 3 major departments because those are the departments that have the people remaining, is police, fire, and highway. And it's,
And I know we've had several meetings on this, we've talked about it.
Is what it
We've
is.
added this, we've subtracted that, but there's definitely some things in there that are kind of more cemented in. We've been, you know, as we've been going through this process, we've identified, so just wanted to kind of get it really clear to say, these are things that aren't as movable, you know, and really understand it so I can sleep well at night, I guess.
sure, we can provide that information in memo form by Thursday.
So,
Absolutely.
I had a question for Mike. It hit me after you sat down. So when you said you're inclined to support the school default budget, you realize that, you said that you were, okay, I thought you said the school's default budget was 400,000 less than default.
I was just,
But that's still an increase. It's not a default budget. It's a default budget that they make up.
I understand.
Okay,
I attended their meeting.
okay, because I'm trying to say is an increase is an increase is an increase. It's
Yes.
not the, you know, we're not saving the world and, you know, it's still an increase.
Yes.
So, okay, I just wanted that clear for my own.
I'm inclined to
edification.
vote for the lower number as of tonight that you're presenting. And I
Okay.
think most people would do the same. That's my individual perspective.
All right, I appreciate that.
Can I just voice a fear that I have? As I sat here the
You have
last
a
couple
fear.
of years, I've seen, you know, we talk about level funding things. Even though it costs more to run something, you level fund it, so you're getting less, but still paying the same. We put something off because we don't want to pay for it, because we don't want to pay a tax. I don't want to pay any more taxes than anybody else. But I'm afraid, you know, what if it doesn't get any better? Then 4 to 5 years, are you going to get stuck paying for a bunch of stuff? It frightens me to think what you're going to have to give up to keep up. Are we going to live in a town where we have 4 police officers, 3 firemen, we drive on dirt roads, and the library's open 2 days a week? I'm afraid we're kind of running towards that.
Well, I mean, with all due respect, I don't think we're at the point where, you know, there's, you know, civil
Well,
unrest,
that's what it
like
makes
you're
it, well, I
suggesting.
mean, that's almost what you make it sound like, and Mike's gonna vote for the lower number. And a lot of people are gonna vote for the lower number, but do a lot of people know what it means? What's in that lower number?
Well, again, what you come down to is it's affordability. For years and years and years, we had the cup of coffee analogy. Well, after a while, we've spent a lot of cups of coffee. And eventually, you start running out of, you know, coffee and you're drinking tea because it's more affordable. Well, I mean, that's kind of the analogy you look at.
We've been
It's-
drinking
it's-
tea for 5 years.
Yeah, same here. I guess to your point, yeah, it's possible that things could be lessened, but you can look at it 2 ways. You can either pay what you can afford, or
But
you live without it, you know, outside of your means. But either way, you're gonna end up paying for it. But, you know, personally, you know, my wife just lost her job, so I agree with Mike's statement. It's not better out there. It's not.
No.
And, you know, I'm living on 1 income now.
and correct me
I'm
if
not saying I wanna raise taxes and I wanna start spending a whole bunch of stuff. I'm just saying, I don't know how much I'm willing to give up to pay less.
But just a question I had. I think we asked, and I think you did, address some of the things regarding accounts that typically get hit when you're given the directive, cut the budget. You know, we heard from the fire chief that his overtime account runs out in I don't know, March or something like that. We've heard from the police that something similar to that happens, and what results is short staffing. I think we asked you to give us a realistic number on that, realistic number on gasoline. You know, let's not pretend gasoline's $1.29, a gallon, because, we don't have a bond for a time machine to go back to those prices either.
I'd support that.
Right, but, is that the case in the past? We've, not adequately, funded those accounts in order to get and achieve flat tax rate?
Well, there's, a couple, gas, yes. I mean, there's been discussions where,
And snow?
It snowed, and, but although our usage has been consistent from year to year, it's the question of adequately funding what it costs per gallon. The other issue is the road one. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, we were getting to, policymakers, I'm not criticizing, just what happened, is that we're looking at, $500,000 for roads, and, oh boy, we can really save money by bonding it this year, which is true. But, if you keep bonding them, you end up to the policy decision point where we are today. So, and through the years, in order to meet, and I totally understand why the policymaker said the economy's horrible, gotta hold the line, I totally understand that, but the consequence of that is getting to the staffing levels you are now, where essentially you are at bare bones with your staffing levels of, we need people here to register cars, you've got to make sure assessment properties, you've got to pay bills in the finance office, you got to make sure HR is taken care of, so you don't open up legal liabilities there, so we're essentially flat where we are, so that leaves, if you're looking at a flat this year, it looks to I call them the big three, is, police, fire, and highway, and, that, with every policy decision, there's a consequence, either positive or negative, and that's essentially where we are.
Well, I've been waiting a while. Tom wanted to speak a little while ago.
Yeah, I had, if we go through this, we go through this drill usually every year, and that's, well, what would it take to get to the default, or 2% below default, or flat tax rate, whatever, and we typically go, that's a drill we typically go through. It's probably worthwhile going through again. But there's a couple of things I wanted to mention. One is, for the last, the economy's been in the tank essentially since 2007, 2008 time period. And
7.
so we've been kind of in an emergency, if you will, frame of mind since then. And we've really turned over every rock and looked at some things we wouldn't normally look at. There's one thing that if we are to look at, how we, trim further, I have not been a fan of one trend that we did an emergency status that we could be in danger of trying to institutionalize, and I think there's real negative consequences, kind of what you just mentioned, and let me explain what I'm talking about. The funding of our maintenance trust funds. Those trust funds are set up so that we can fix the library roof, we can fix broken windows, we can fix things without having these spikes in our expenditures, because we've put money in the piggy bank to plan for these things that go wrong, that we know that are going to go wrong, so that we don't have an impact to the taxpayers that's extraordinary. Now, what we've done over the past few years, some people have said we've robbed those piggy banks in order to give the illusion of, a flat tax rate. Some say it's smoke and mirrors. Regardless of what you call it, I don't think we should continue doing it, because by defunding those accounts, and so not only did we not fund them, but now we have to fund them and try to get caught up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a double hit, unfortunately. So there's a consequence down the road for those types of decisions. Understanding that when they were done, we were in an emergency situation. But we can't be perpetually in an emergency situation. We've got to have, I think, the forethought to think ahead a few years so that we don't bankrupt the council 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, or the budget committee 4 years from now, to say, how do we ever get in this situation? Well, without good, sound fiscal planning for the future, that's how we get in those situations, and that's going to require a bond or some type of spike in the tax rate in order to recover. And so I would not be in favor of continuing to rob the maintenance trust funds in order to give the illusion of a flat tax or a reduction in the tax rate, that we're going to have to we're gonna have to make up. So maybe next year, the increase is gonna be double what it would be this year in order to make that up. I just don't think that's sound fiscal planning. The other question I had was a specific question about the budget, and it was about our gas costs. A few years ago, Dave, at the request of the council, you did an analysis of what it would, the cost for gasoline versus maybe switching over to some electric options or hybrid options in our vehicle fleet. And I believe you came back and, given the cost-benefit analysis with the cost of gas at the time and the cost of the new technology, I think the analysis showed it was not a savings to the community. Maybe it's time at this new price point to rerun that analysis to see if there are some amount of vehicles, administrative type vehicles in our town fleet that we might be able to save some gas. And if the vehicles are leased, perhaps the additional cost of the hybrid technology won't be borne, and maybe it'll be in the residual value at the end of the lease. So I know that probably won't have much impact on the 2013 budget, but it could be an analysis.
We can revisit that, sure.
So what you guys have heard me say throughout this whole process is default is 2.3%. Single largest increase in the last 5 or 6 years. We haven't submitted a budget that's been above 1 or 2% in 5 or 6 years. We've robbed Peter to pay Paul. Tom's right. We're there. So we have 2 choices. Come in with a default budget. Come in with a budget that's realistic to run the town and tell the people, make your choice. These are the services you're going to give up. Or vote for the default budget, but these are the services you're going to give up. You can go down the path of a flat tax, but what are we looking at? 3, 5, 6 layoffs to get there?
Well, to get there, we'd have to look at the revenue side. I suspect the revenues are pretty flat from the previous years. So we're looking at reducing the expenditure side by about $600,000 to $650,000, which is
So it's at least 5.
More than that.
More than
probably
that.
8.
Probably 8. Okay. And then we're going to put a warrant article out there and say we're going to hire firemen. We look kind of silly.
Yeah.
So, we spent the last, as Tom said, in emergency mode for the last 5 or 6 years. We're at a crossroad. Now, if the people want to spend more money, that's their decision. We've created a form of government that lets them do that. If they don't, it's their decision. These are the services they give up. We're there.
If I may, I gotta imagine that we're kind of in an experiment mode here with this new form of government. I gotta imagine that the deliberative session is gonna be lots of adds to the budget and lots of minuses to the budget. So it's gonna be a very volatile situation, I think. And our ability to predict at this point what's gonna be on the ballot for the voters to vote on, I think is highly variable, depending on people's understanding of how that form of government works. I think there's going to be some experimentation. People are going to try things. People are going to think they can try things where they can't. I think there's going to be a window up and down that's going to happen that we're putting a number on the wall, and where we end up, I think, is going to be, like I said, a highly variable situation.
But I think we need to be at least realistic with people and say, this is what it costs to put the lights on in this town, in the run of the place. If you want it to be less, okay, that's something gives. Okay. You can have your flat tax, that means something goes away. And maybe you should have your backup plan saying, when this goes, this is what happens. Right. And that way people can make their choice. And we can all sit there and say, I'm going to vote for the lower number, but, when the lower number means X, or that something closes, the library closes 2 days a week, or whatever, or the cable studio is shut down, whatever the decision is, at least we've been honest with people and told them, we're not going to, have all these accounts, these overtime accounts run out, mid-year, or whatever.
So Dave, what's your expectation tonight? Are you looking for a preliminary number, or you want that Thursday night?
Well, I'll need a preliminary number for the first public hearing by Thursday at the latest. I'll also need by Thursday a decision whether to go to a bond hearing or not. And then we have the first public hearing, you can make adjustments after that. We have a number of data points which you've requested, which we'll get back to you by Thursday. So I don't need any policy decisions tonight. But if anybody would like any other data information, I'd like to have that tonight so we can work on that between now and Thursday.
Dave, I just have a question on this. Trying to work off my sheet still, because that's a lot of the research that I did do. And, you know, when I got to the bottom line of 2.2 million, I thought I was a star, but then when you indicated that these are a lot of contractual obligations. What I did do was do a little bit of math, and it seems like we're still at a crossroad of $980,000 that you said were SDRs. I guess, so it's straight in my head that staff default reductions of $908,000, if you added all those up with staff saying that those are possible SDRs. I know we don't want to go down that road if we don't have to, but these were all increases. Again, we have a budget. We have an increase off of 2012 budget, and those increases that I indicated were at $908,000. Now, you're just taking really quickly your town manager budget of $26,991. If you took off the 908, you'd be at $26,083, which would be $315,000 below the default budget. So, in essence, in my brain here, what we're saying is that you have a town manager budget of $26,991, but if we needed to go to a staff default reduction, we could bring that to $315,000 below default. And those are not contractual items. So that's another thing that we could look at, and that spreadsheet is on council's shared drive as well, so. I'm wondering if that's a way to go. I mean, a third option, as far as, I understand there's cuts to be made in that, but those were items that, what I did is I went down through this book. I mean, this book is about, what, I don't know, 300, 400, 500 pages, whatever it was, and I basically looked at all the numbers that were, you know, either 25% increase or $5,000 or $6,000 more than they were in 2012, and I came up with 43 of those items. So sometimes you look at one area to hit hard, and it's a big number, but that's not always the solution. If you take it from, little pieces here and there, $908,000 is a big number when you look at, these items individually adding together to 908,000, so. That's just another idea, that's all, so.
But if
I guess I'd like an opportunity to go back and review the SDR, because the SDR total should not be below the default budget. So I'll have to go back and look at that, Joe.
So all I did basically was anything that you said SDR to, I just added it up on a formula, it's 908 grand, so.
I'll take a look at that.
Yep, so there could be a $315,000 error in there, but I thought that was kind of a good number to look at as well, if we could possibly do it according to your staff default reductions that you said, so.
Tom?
I'm inclined to give Dave a number on Thursday with the full understanding that it's a preliminary number. We heard from Mike Brown tonight, but I like the process. We're going to schedule a public hearing. I'd like to hear from a lot more members, a lot more Mike Browns out there, a lot more members of the public, and then we have an opportunity, just so we understand, and for the budget committee also, we have an opportunity at that point, given the public comment, to massage things after we take that input. So this number that we give Dave on Thursday is by no means the number that we're asking to be given to the deliberative session. It's a starting point to put out there for the public to consider, and then let's hear what the public's response is. Either they're good with it, or they want it up, or they want it down, somewhere in between, and then we can react to that input, and the budget committee can also react to that input. So there may be some things that the public has thought of that we haven't thought of, that we haven't considered. So I'm eager to go through the public public hearing process.
So Dave, is my understanding that you're going to look at what a flat budget is?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And that way, when people do ask what that looks like, we'll have the truth of what it looks like.
Right, exactly.
Okay. And as we talked about per council policy last year, it's not gonna be the SRO, it's not gonna be crossing guards.
Right.
It's- Okay. Reed, you had a question? Step right up. I await them.
With bated breath.
The last 6 comments I heard from here, I felt good and rather lousy about. So I'm going to go right down them, and I'm going to get up and sit there and shut up. But you're going to listen. Tom said, when the people know how much it takes to turn the lights on in this house, in this town, they'll give their opinion. I'll go dark. I've got kerosene lamps. I can do that. It's the police and the fire that bother me. I mean, how many elderly people are here who don't want a flat tax like Mike wants because it'll cut off the police and the fire and other situations, highway potholes and everything. That's the important thing for the elderly, of which I consider myself not. This gentleman said he's getting scared. How much can we take out and still run the town? That's the most common sense thing that was said from all of you, all night. You should think of what's going to happen in the future. In the future, some of you will still be around. You look young enough anyway. I won't have to worry about it, but somebody will. But you should, on the way up, manage the town so the future won't be a lot of pluses, spikes, you call them, I believe. Okay. Tom said, same thing. He says, slow down. Don't listen to the other side of the people. Mike's side was 1, flat tax. I say, keep it on a level tax. Level to the point of view that I won't have my house burned down or my police necessity or my potholes taken care of. There is something that you all are missing entirely, and that is all of you all are thinking about. I mean, I don't have a job. I live on a pension. Okay, now it's a good pension. I'm not complaining that like Sean and them, but I mean, you have to look at the entire town. You can't look at just one group of people. Of course, you're going to say, hell, the elderly are just one group of people. Okay, but that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Reed. Okay, so, once again, it's back to up here. Budget Committee, are there any other questions, comments, concerns, something that the council may or may not have said, done, offended?
Sure. From this one Budget Committee member's perspective, I do have a concern with being able to come with a recommendation by Thursday. The Budget Committee has not had a chance to sit. We've had, just together and actually discuss our thoughts as a group. Personally, we may be able to come to individual ideas and recommendations by Thursday. I'm certain there are lots of good ideas that may come forth, but to have to come to the meeting next Thursday, which is only couple days away. We meet with the school district tomorrow night. That gives us Wednesday, and I'm not sure if we are going to be awake enough to meet on Wednesday, to actually have a discussion. So anything that the Budget Committee would recommend come this Thursday would definitely be under the category of preliminary by any stretch of anybody's
Well,
imagination.
Tom's gonna,
Todd, let me suggest that you not feel compelled to come with a recommendation on Thursday, that you continue monitoring the activity and listen to the public comment, and your obligation to come forth with a recommendation is only prior to printing of the warrant. So you've got some time as the Budget Committee to decide whether or not you want to support what, closer to the final number, or whether you want to recommend an alternate place in the recommendation. So I think you've got some time. You've got the luxury of having a little more time than we do. So I wouldn't feel compelled that you've got to come back with a hard recommendation. I would just keep following the process and stay with it. And I think you've probably got a good, I'd say, 5-6 weeks before you've got to nail down what your recommendation is.
Well, I'm actually very glad to hear that, because I did see some scared faces around. We haven't had a chance to really have a good roundtable on the topic, and there's a lot to digest. Joe Green has done a pretty good job of actually pulling apart some of the items with increases and so forth. I believe the Budget Committee needs to dive in a bit more and do similar type of analyses, and then we'll be able to come forward with something. And quite frankly, I like some of the discussion points today, specifically with regard to making sure that, we don't cut ourselves to the point where we don't have the services that we really come to take for granted every day in this town. So we want to be cognizant of that as well, while maintaining the lowest possible tax rate we can. I mean, that's the blatantly obvious from this one Budget Committee member's perspective.
Can I just counterpoint to that? And as I was going through this budget, again, I didn't look at, a $400,000 line item. We're still going to spend the $400,000 line item. What I was worried about was why it was $450,000. So what was the reason? Was it compelling enough for me to say, yeah, that made sense for $50,000? As far as I'm concerned, $908,000 of that was not compelling enough. So
You're looking at the increased percentages.
yes, no, increased percentages and increased dollars. So, I mean, it's an easy way to look at it, and like you said, when you dive into it, it's kind of, it jumps out at you. I mean, why is it, we can still run the town, and the lights are still gonna get paid, and the fire trucks are still gonna go out, and these are all just up above and beyond, where we were, in the budget last year, so.
Tom?
Dave, looking at our budget calendar, we're going to have our second public hearing on January 12th to adopt the budget warrant. What can you tell the Budget Committee that, what's the right time period that they need to take a position on the budget? That they're going to have a meeting, and they're going to get together and vote their support for the budget, plus the other warrant articles that'll be on the...
Right, the warrant will be signed by the council on January 16th. So anytime between now and that point, we need to post for a deliberative session. This is, I think everybody acknowledged that the process is a work in progress this year, because it's a new form for us, and so is the schedule.
Well, it's always been, before Margot sends it off to the printer, you need to get the votes recorded.
Right.
So are we saying that, Todd, you need to have your meeting and get your votes nailed down by the 16th? Is that the right date?
Yeah, because that's the date we have to post the warrant, that day, actually the 17th of January, we post the warrant, because the February 6th meeting, deliberative session is fixed by Council vote, and the council had essentially an 8-day window in which to schedule that. So, the schedule itself is a work in progress, because we have to finish up essentially a month ahead of time.
So
Yeah, it's very compressed.
if I may, so it looks like, looking at Tom's schedule that he has up here on the monitor, it looks like the last bond hearing, public input, would be December 28th. So between, I guess after that's done, between the 28th and the 16th would be when the Budget Committee should meet and, get their positions as far as where they are on the budget and such. But between now and then, during the whole budget cycle, they're still going to have their input and recommendations.
Right, I mean, if you're looking at December 28th, I mean, at that point...
And I know that's a tentative date, but I'm saying that's what you have on the schedule.
Well, at that point, we'd need a budget recommendation from the council to post for a second public hearing, which again can change. That's similar as previous years. So really, the drop-dead issue is after the January 12th public hearing. Now, understand is that once we post the deliberative session, I mean, the warrant for the second hearing, you can adjust items at or after the second hearing. You can't add new items. I mean, that violates DRA regulations regarding adequate notice. So at that point, after that point, you can adjust any line item, but you can't add new line items. It's really, that's uncommon because if you've looked at our budget and it's so long, there's got to be a line item you can fit something in somewhere.
So the Budget Committee really can't take a position until after the 12th, because that's when we'll finalize our numbers, because we could still be moving numbers around from the result of the 12th.
And historically, you have been. The huge difference is that the time frame's been compressed about 30 days because,
Yeah, so if the Budget Committee takes a position on a number on January 1st, and then we change it on January 12th, then it invalidates their position. So you'll have to have a subsequent meeting. So my recommendation is you schedule yourself a meeting like on the 13th or 14th, and then immediately get your votes into Dave so he can incorporate them into the documentation.
Yeah, certainly need to do that post the 12th, but prior to that, I mean, hopefully we'd like to have discussions to be able to bring to the council and actually open up some solid
Absolutely.
discussion.
I just
debate,
didn't want
and
you
so
to
forth.
think that you had till this Thursday to...
Well, yeah, it wasn't being made too clear.
Okay.
So, good. Budget Committee is at ease now.
Dave, I had a question. The budget you submitted had an increase of about 1.7 million over the previous year. Out of that number, do you have any idea what were contractual obligations, what they might have amounted to in that total number?
essentially the contractual obligations is your FY13 default budget. Okay, so my recommended budget was 26,991. The default budget is 26,394, so the difference is, my budget includes about $600,000 in items, or actually $592,000 in items which are not contractually mandated, but a result of discussion with department managers who believe that that's the level we ought to be funding to provide the current level of services, which may have been reduced over the last 2 or 3 budget sites.
So 600,000 out of the 1.7.
Right.
A non-contractual obligation.
That's correct.
So we're looking at 1.1 mil contractual obligation.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, so there you have it.
What we'll do is, first thing in the morning, we'll send out a list of our task. And so if anybody wants to add to that, let us know as soon as possible tomorrow. So we'll have tomorrow and Wednesday. Our goal is to get something out to you by Wednesday and the business, so you'll have a night to look at it before we meet again on Thursday.
All right, you know where we are if you need us.
Yep.
Okay, yep.
So did we come to a conclusion on what the plan of attack is in terms of, forgive the expression, in terms of alternate plans for the budget versus funding? Where did we end up? Because that could impact the budget, to John's point.
For the roads?
For the roads.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Janos and
bond
I and
versus-
Sue will kick that around and give you different options. But again,
Okay,
some of that's going to be a value judgment. We can give you the
Yeah.
hard numbers, but some of it's going to be a
I
value
think,
judgment.
if I heard it right, I think the maintenance trust idea is probably a solid one to start moving towards.
But there could be various levels. of
Absolutely.
that,
Right.
and
Absolutely.
phasing it in so
Yep.
that you can wean ourselves off and that sort of thing.
Right, and that's what we'll come to a consensus on, hopefully, so.
Will you have If I may, will you have that flat budget laid out for Thursday? Is that too short a time?
It will be laid out, but it'll be laid out not in entirely specific terms. I'll give you a sense of the money we'll have to reduce from the current budget. And I'll give you staffing levels where, there's potential, but, I will not be in a position to say we ought to eliminate X position and Y position from the department. I'll give you some general, so you'll have an impact on that. I just won't be in a position by Thursday to say we ought to reduce this level of service.
So to set the scenario for the discussion on Thursday, we're gonna have really three numbers to look at. One is the recommended budget, one is the default budget, and one is flat tax.
That's correct.
Budget.
That's correct. Right.
Okay. I understand that.
Please.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, to clarify, we are going to have a legal opinion on contingent warrant articles in case of a failure of a bond by Thursday.
You'll have a legal opinion from our attorney, and I don't want, I'm not trying to dodge the question, but our attorney will essentially say, my best guess what DRA will say. We will make a phone call to DRA, but they are habitually non-committal about a lot of issues, so, good people up there, but, we used to send them the warrant article, the entire warrant before town meeting. What do you think? That looks great. We go to the tax rate and they go, oh, well, what about this? We pull a letter out, so you said it was good 6 months ago, so, it's that frustration we're dealing with, but we'll definitely get a read from our attorney based upon his experience coupled with ours about how DRA approaches things. We'll give you our best advice.
The reason I'm asking is that when I was on the school board, we used contingent articles every year because we never knew what was going to pass and what wasn't going to pass. I'm curious as to why contingent articles are now suspect.
My best response is, I guess it's the current philosophy, whatever that is, of the folks who are making those decisions at the state level. A lot of this is not defined by state law.
Yeah.
It's defined by interpretation of administrative rules from different departments, so that's where the fluff.
But the upshot of this is, if they're not allowing contingent articles, they're actually taking away some latitude by the voters.
I don't disagree with you at all.
Because contingent articles allow the voters to make a decision on whether or not to fund the bond, and when they didn't, they would almost uniformly turn around and support that contingent article. If Article 3 fails, then here's Article 7, and they would support that, because it isn't that they want to defund that whole area, they just don't want to fund it at that level.
One of the frustrating things we encounter dealing with a state agency is their attempt to interpret the voter's intent, where at times, quite frankly, I don't necessarily think that's their role, but that's the world they've assumed, so that's the world we have to live in.
It sort of sounds like you're arguing logic with the illogical.
My mistake.
Hey, Dave? Just following on the contingent article, why wouldn't, and I know you can't give me an answer, but why wouldn't you be able to do that when you right now have a contingent article in here under Article 15, which is authorization for a special meeting on cost items?
Because that one is specifically authorized by state law.
Oh, okay.
So the state law will allow that, but they won't allow us to.
Right. So if it's state law, and actually, that state law is actually clear, unlike a lot of state laws we deal with, but, if there's a state law, then the
Then you can
reviewing
do
agency,
it.
they don't have any option. If the state law allows it, then we can do it.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Chair votes affirmative, 5-0. Thank you to the public for coming out, to the staff for coming out, and to the Budget Committee for being here tonight. Thank you.